Hogwarts. I'm more than a Dark Lord. Chapter 81. I seem to be here. Ginny. Looking at the now empty sofa beside him, Harry blinked blankly. How long had he been spacing out? The previously lost memories returned at that moment. It seemed that Ginny had already said goodbye to him and returned to her dormitory alone some time ago, but he hadn't reacted at all. This truly is. The boy patted his seemingly sluggish head and opened his backpack on the table. Meow. The sudden cry interrupted the boy's movement. Mrs. Loris raised her head and stared at the boy, her long tail swaying in the air. I should go back to sleep now. Harry stood there silently for a moment, then grabbed his backpack and headed to the dormitory. Things seemed to be just as William said. Faint sunlight passed through the castle filled with chicken feathers, illuminating Hogwarts in the morning light. And since Moaning Myrtle was attacked, most people didn't even know she was attacked, as she was not well liked. No more attacks had occurred. Smiles returned to everyone's faces, and Professor Sprout happily reported during one dinner that the mandrakes had become capricious and taciturn, indicating they were quickly leaving childhood. Has the heir of the secret chamber truly been sorted out? It had been over a month since Harry and Hermione snuck into the Hufflepuff common room. When they told the Weasley twins they lost the Marauders map, though they did get scolded a bit, nothing more was said afterward. It's okay, it has taught us enough, Fred said generously, patting Harry's shoulder a few minutes later. Time passed quickly, and soon it was February 14th. During breakfast, everyone finally understood what Gilderoy Lockhart meant when he confidently said yesterday, I believe everyone needs to move away from that awful smell of chicken poop. Lockhart's mood had been quite poor lately, which was obvious to everyone. Apart from classes and meals, he rarely left his office. As Lockhart himself explained, he simply couldn't stand those roosters flying through the corridors, dropping bombs, and even a hint of the smell would cause him to die. This was a completely misguided decision. Chicken feathers and poop everywhere can't stop a real criminal. Perhaps we should get these chickens out of Hogwarts so I can focus on catching that terrorist. With my skills, it's only a matter of time. Unfortunately, no matter how much Lockhart protested, nobody cared about his thoughts. And today, he seemed to finally find a chance to shine. The walls were covered with bright pink flowers, reflecting light. Ribbons adorned the tails of the flowers, and worse, countless heart-shaped confetti kept falling from the light blue ceiling, landing in nearly every porridge bowl. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Lockhart said loudly. So far, 32 people have sent me cards, and I thank them. Yes, I've arranged this little surprise for you all, and there's more. Lockhart clapped his hands, and 12 gloomy-looking little elves walked in through the doors leading to the hall. Different from regular elves, Lockhart had them all wear golden wings, carry harps, and their faces were covered with multicolored glitter. Resisting the urge to walk to the teacher's table and smack his wasted bowl of porridge in Lockhart's face, William stood up. Where are you going? Cedric instinctively raised his head, continuously jotting and drawing on a piece of paper. You're going to write a letter to Cho Chang. William raised his eyebrows in disbelief, using Lockhart's elves. Yes, it sounds quite romantic. Cedric asked perplexedly, why? Nothing, I wish you happiness, my friend. William shook his head with a sympathetic look, then added, tonight's practical duel is cancelled. Really? Cedric asked with delight, clearly unaware he'd face something scarier than a practical duel tonight. Of course. William patted the boy's shoulder and silently mourned for him. This farce lasted the entire day. By noon, the frequency of the little elves sightings had finally decreased, much to Lockhart's displeasure. He claimed the elves were negligent, arriving late and leaving early, even wanting to refuse to pay their appearance fees. But the elves disagreed, claiming their members had gone missing in the castle and Lockhart was mainly responsible. Both sides argued heatedly in the hall, and one angry little elf even pulled out a large chunk of Lockhart's hair. All the professors sat quietly watching this spectacle, even Dumbledore simply smiled observing both sides' antics during the dispute. As for why the elves had decreased, William said he really had no idea. Hey, you, Harry Potter. Finally, after lunch, in the hallway leading to the foyer, a particularly grim little elf stopped Harry Potter, who was about to head to class, using his elbow to block others and intercepted Harry just before he could escape. No, Harry despondently held his head. I have a musical message to deliver personally to Harry Potter. The elf said, striking the harp with an aggressive stance. Not here. Harry turned, ready to flee. Stand still. The elf muttered, grabbing the boy's backpack and pulling him back. Let me go. Harry shouted, tugging at his backpack. With a loud ripping sound, the boy's backpack split in half, scattering his books, magic wand, parchment, and quills all over the floor, the ink bottle breaking on top, spilling bright red ink everywhere. Hey, don't block the way. Draco Malfoy emerged from the hall, saw the disheveled Harry Potter, and his eyes gleamed slightly. Oh, who's this? Is it someone confessing to our dear Scarhead? Don't block the way. Before the boy finished speaking, someone kicked the blocking Malfoy aside. Who's that? Who dares to kick me? I'm going to tell my dad. Before Malfoy finished speaking, he saw William standing behind him, looking down at him expressionlessly. Malfoy instantly remembered his father's advice and instinctively retreated to the wall, trying hard to minimize his presence. Oh, his eyes are so green. The elf had barely finished reciting the first line of poetry before William directly transported it to the center of the Black Lake. Are you okay? William squatted down, helping Harry pick up the scattered books. Thanks. Harry, barely avoiding social embarrassment, finally breathed a sigh of relief. He reached out for the books William handed him, but his hand sorting the books was pressed down. Where did this come from? William squinted, pulling out a black notebook from the pile of books in the boy's hand. A Christmas gift, but I don't know who sent it. Looking at the diary belonging to Tom Riddle in William's hand, Harry was stunned for a moment. He even forgot about this thing, a blank notebook. On the morning he received the gift, he and Hermione studied it for half a day, but even when Hermione brought out the unhexing book and waved her magic wand over it for quite a while, it still appeared to be just a blank notebook. Except for an unknown signature, there was nothing unusual. William opened the notebook in his hand, staring at the blank pages with a slight frown. All the entries he previously wrote had disappeared, including the words he used to intimidate the diary. The only thing remaining on the first page was the faint initials of Tom M. Riddle. What's wrong? Harry asked, somewhat confused. Let's go. Don't block the hallway. Percy, who had also left the Great Hall, looked at Harry holding his backpack in his arms. The class bell rung 3 minutes ago. Nothing. William shook his head too, placing the diary into Harry's arms. Although he felt something strange about William, Harry was too busy with his upcoming charm class and hurriedly thanked him before running up the stairs. By the way, Professor Lockhart seemed to have seen you cast a spell on those gnomes just now. After Harry left, Percy suddenly sidled up to William, whispering a reminder. Hearing this, William looked up, his gaze crossing the hall to a professor still seated eating his meal. Lockhart and William exchanged a brief look before Lockhart instinctively lowered his head. Then, while rubbing the bald patches on his head, he hastily abandoned his still warm pie and left the hall through the side door. He saw it. So what? Where's Dumbledore? William didn't pay much attention as he shifted his gaze to the head seat at the teacher's table, where the wide high-backed chair sat empty. I don't know, he seemed to have left after eating. Percy paused, seemingly not understanding why the topic shifted so abruptly. All right, then you go to class. William nodded, pulling out a piece of parchment from his pocket and stepping over the feathers scattered on the spiral staircase. Oh, okay. Percy responded instinctively, then seemed to realize something. Wait, I'm the prefect, right? Knock, knock. Enter. Upon hearing the knock, Snape looked up, a bit curious about who might be at the door of the potions classroom. People rarely knocked on his door. Usually, it was only Professor McGonagall looking for him with business. The little wizards would rather not see him for a week, so why would they come on their own? As for Dumbledore, that old man preferred to suddenly appear behind him. But when the door was pushed open from the outside, the curiosity on Snape's face instantly turned cold. He instinctively tightened his grip on the wand beneath his robes. Richard. Mr. Richard, I don't think I've ever invited you to my classroom, the man said, his expression icy, his drawled speech indicating an inner calm he didn't truly feel. William, casually closing the door, looked at Snape with the kind of gaze one uses on a simpleton. I'm a student, this is a classroom, isn't it only natural for me to enter a classroom? But it's not class time. Snape inhaled deeply. But you owe me 13 sessions of post-class tutoring, dear Professor. William casually sat across from Snape, replying unabashedly. Indeed, since he had left Snape entirely off balance at the duel club, they hadn't spoken privately again, not even during potions class. Snape avoided the quadrant of the classroom where William sat. This led the fifth-year Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff wizards to a realization that any of the 8 spots surrounding William in potions class were absolutely safe. Even if you blew up a cauldron there, Snape wouldn't bat an eye. So, the spots around William became highly sought after. What do you want? Snape's tone could hardly be called pleasant. He could barely restrain himself from casting an evil curse on the boy, but reason held his hand back, not because of status or any muddled issues, but simply because he knew he couldn't win. Professor McGonagall certainly wouldn't appear in the potions classroom to extricate him. Where's Dumbledore? William didn't beat around the bush and asked directly. I don't know, maybe you should go to his office and ask instead of coming to the Slytherin dungeon. Snape lowered his head, trying to focus on the little wizard's paper before him as he marked the parchment with a red-inked quill. The password is, lemon sherbet. I went, he's not there. Then you should ask Minerva McGonagall, she's the deputy headmistress. I actually have one more thing to discuss with you. What? Voldemort's diary. That night, did Dumbledore say anything to you after I left? William squinted, watching Snape's expression change closely. On that night when he took the diary to find Dumbledore, Snape had been there, having listened to the whole conversation. No. The quill continued moving over the parchment, and after a moment of thought, Snape casually shook his head. Is that so? William nodded. Then do you know that the diary is now in Harry Potter's hands? The writing paused, and Snape instinctively looked up, staring hard into William's eyes, trying to confirm he hadn't misheard. Stop glaring. No matter how wide you open your eyes, it's still the truth. Unfortunately, all he received was confirmation. As William continued speaking, I just saw the diary in Harry's backpack. If this has nothing to do with you, then there are only 2 possibilities left. The headmaster's office was burgled. Or, Dumbledore did it himself. No need for William to spell it out. Snape immediately understood the unspoken latter half of the sentence. Impossible. He reflexively countered. Do I have any reason to lie to you? If you knew where that old man was, I wouldn't bother talking to you about this. He's supposed to preside over a Wizengamot meeting today, about the Edinburgh Fire Dragon incident. After thinking for a moment, Snape slowly replied, marking a P on the paper he was grading. Will he be back tonight? I don't know. Boom. Green flames lit up in the fireplace, and the next moment, an elderly man dressed in a bright purple robe bent down and emerged from the fire, still keeping a backward glance as if he were greeting someone. However, the next moment, his movements hesitated slightly. Back already. William, who was playing with Fawkes, turned his head from beside the Phoenix's perch. You all. Dumbledore's blue eyes glanced around the room at William and Snape, feeling a sense of déjà vu about the situation. He wondered. Hasn't this happened several times already in the last 2 semesters? Albus. But this time seemed different from before. Snape's expression, usually unfriendly, was now filled with hostility, something never seen before. You promised me, you promised to protect him, so why did you give the Dark Lord's items? Whoa, looks like you're really concerned about Harry Potter, huh? Observing Snape's show of genuine emotion, William couldn't help raising his eyebrows. He originally planned to wait alone in the headmaster's office until this old man finished his meeting and then question him alone. However, after knowing of the situation, Snape insisted on joining, and though William couldn't initially understand why Snape was so emotional, it now seemed. There's another story here. But if he cares so much about Harry, why does Snape often want to expel him? And William noticed more than once that Snape looked at Harry as though he were an enemy. What's this supposed to mean? Love so deep turns to hate. These British folks are so awkward. He has this responsibility, Severus, you should know this better than I do. Dumbledore's expression did not change due to Snape's behavior. He slowly settled behind his desk. Would you like something to drink? He looked at William, who's busy with Fawkes. Let Fawkes be, it just underwent nirvana. At this time, Fawkes had just undergone rebirth, returning once again to its fledgling state, with barely any feathers on its wrinkled pinkish-purple skin, looking rather unattractive. Cola. William placed Fox back in its nest and sat opposite Dumbledore. No Pepsi. Tea, perhaps. Dumbledore paused. Oh, that works too. The next moment, a cup appeared in William's hand. But he's only a second year, 12 years old, we can't hand over this responsibility so early. It was apparent that Snape hadn't finished speaking yet. Dumbledore's words hadn't convinced him. The man placed the teacup appearing his hand aside and continued with a grim expression to watch the old man beginning to have tea with William. What responsibility? William was curious, placing the overly sweet tea aside. 12 years is enough, Severus, you've seen Harry's excellence. Just last year, he and his companions. Dumbledore sighed. We don't have as much time as we used to think. I can sense. The elderly man's gaze seemed to surpass the two before him, extending into the distant horizon. You're saying. Snape's breath slightly halted. He instinctively covered his left wrist under the man's gaze, as Dumbledore lightly nodded. If you two keep playing Riddler, I'm going to take action. Ignored for quite a while, William chose to directly pull out his magic wand, pointing it at the old bat's temple. Snape. Wait, the old man plays Riddler, but you point the wand at me. What justice is there in this? Hold on, William, don't rush, this story is a bit long. Then be brief, first explain clearly why you gave that diary to Harry. William furrowed his brows, his tone unfriendly. You said you wanted to do some research, and the diary you said was borrowed by you, you promised to keep it safe. Wait, you better not tell me. Yes, William, this is my research. Dumbledore nodded, affirming William's guess. Research what? The Savior and the Dark Lord's love-hate relationship. William spoke with no good humor but lowered the wand pointing at Snape's temple. Is this a female channel or something? Of course not. Dumbledore shook his head. Savior, the title sounds good, but simultaneously, the responsibility behind it is unimaginable. Voldemort didn't really die. As soon as the war was won, I knew he'd return sooner or later. Standing to the side, Snape kept silent, whereas 2 years ago, he might have opposed saying Dumbledore was worrying excessively, since the British magic realm had been peaceful for over a decade, but last year's Philosopher's Stone incident and the resurgence of the Death Eater's mark recently made him completely believe it. Return. William raised an eyebrow, not taking it seriously. Even if that fool came crawling out of the coffin, so what, just a black wizard. Plus, Harry Potter's a savior because he rebounded Voldemort's killing curse at 1 year old, right? Does he need to save a second time? How? Is he Jesus? Just a black wizard. Snape's eyebrows twitched unconsciously, having the instinctive feeling that William was being too arrogant. Then he remembered he couldn't defeat him, so Snape chose silence. No, Potter is called the Savior because of a prophecy. Dumbledore shook his head, and as he spoke these words, visible pain flashed through Snape's eyes. Prophecy. I'm going back. Snape quickly stood up, didn't wait for the other two to speak, and walked straight out of the headmaster's office. Until he was out the door, his farewell slowly drifted in from outside. What happened to him? William was puzzled as he watched the hurriedly disappearing figure at the stairway. He made a mistake once and is now trying to atone. Severus is not what you imagine. Dumbledore adjusted his sitting posture, waved his hand, and both of their teacups refilled again. All right, but what does it have to do with the prophecy? William remained puzzled. Before that, Dumbledore seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then, he took a deep breath. Senior. Wait, what did you just call me? Hey, kid, quit pretending. I'd recognize you even if you turned to ash. Not waiting for Dumbledore, a teasing voice suddenly echoed from behind William. Phineas Nigellus Black. As the most unpopular headmaster in Hogwarts history, this man achieved a great feat that no other headmaster ever managed, uniting all little wizards against him. Even the archenemies, Gryffindor and Slytherin were no exception. So, it's really you. William frowned as thoughts flashed through his mind. No wonder Dumbledore had no doubts about his ability to overpower Snape that night, and even strongly supported William's chicken-raising plan in the castle. It turned out, that old guy hanging on the wall spilled the beans to him. How about it, little brat, surprised? Phineas Black's portrait stroked his beard smugly. You old codger, you've been dead for half a century and you still have so much to say. Is it because your rectum and tonsils are connected? William retorted without a moment's hesitation. Hey, you little punk, how dare you talk like that? You stood me up back in the day, making me ride a broom for 3 days to find Hecate, who had already gone vacationing in Romania, otherwise there wouldn't have been a defense against the dark arts professor that term. Phineas was so infuriated he almost jumped out of the painting, and you know how much trouble you caused me over those 3 years. Wow, you poor thing, rode for 3 days. How didn't you just fall and die? William read aloud with no emotion. Ahem, how about both of you stop arguing? Dumbledore quickly interrupted the two who were beginning to exchange personal greetings. He raised his hand and Phineas's portrait fell silent. It was, after all, the headmaster's office, his territory. Actually, you got it wrong. After a moment of eye contact with Dumbledore, William sat upright. Strictly speaking, the year you enrolled I had already graduated, and would even have become your defense against the dark arts professor, so, you should address me as Professor, or Mr. You might want to just stop now. Dumbledore gave an awkward yet courteous smile, disregarding William's request as he stood up from behind the desk. So, Senior, how much do you know about Voldemort? Just a village-level terrorist, feels less threatening than Lanlock. William shook his head. Since the other party had chosen to reveal his identity directly, he had no need to hide either. Lanlock was a goblin who once instigated the Second Goblin Rebellion, digging with his followers all the way to the underground of Hogwarts, targeting the secret vault sealed by the Guardians. If he were to gain that power, perhaps from then on the British magic realm would bear the Goblin surname. But naturally, William couldn't let him succeed. After a fierce battle, he successfully thwarted that fool's scheme over a year's time, preserving peace in the world, and successfully passed his OWL exams. And in William's view, Voldemort's crowning achievement was solely the terrorist attacks that ended with the death of a dozen people. Not even as many as he killed in a day in the Forbidden Forest. The rebelling goblin. Dumbledore's eyes betrayed a touch of reminiscence. Having entered school the same year William graduated, he grew up listening to the stories of this legendary senior. The Goblin Rebellion had ended just 2 years prior, and while the magic world was revitalizing, the under-renovation Hogwarts castle was still undergoing some repairs and resets. Dumbledore, filled with expectations for the magic world, entered school under these circumstances, and the no-show at the opening feast by the new defense against the dark arts professor, known as the Goblin Rebellion Terminator, naturally became the topic of conversation at mealtimes. William is a god. Sitting at the Gryffindor long table, young Dumbledore heard a Gryffindor fifth-year student say passionately, he defeated all the members of our duel club within 3 days, all of them. And he had only been at school for a week then. Those words had a significant impact on young Dumb, setting the stage for his later rise to go through the entire duel club top to bottom. So, you still haven't spoken of the prophecy. Looking at Dumbledore, who stood in the center of the room and had fallen silent, William frowned, trying to pull the topic back on track. During Voldemort's heyday, someone made a prophecy about him. Dumbledore came back to his senses and walked slowly to the other side of the room, pulling the mechanism on the bookshelf. In the next moment, with a rumble, a gray stone basin emerged from the bookshelf, filled with a silvery substance, a material much like a cloud, appearing both liquid and gaseous. Pensieve. Seeing the rune language etched around the basin's rim, William immediately recognized the item. A wizard could extract their memory from their mind and place it in the basin, which could then be rewatched. Care to take a look together? Dumbledore stood by the basin, pressing his wand to his temple, and soon, a shimmering silver thread, brighter than his beard, was drawn from it. It seems you trust me a lot. I just know you won't be a bad person, Senior. Dumbledore nodded, then shook his head. Upon hearing this, William instinctively turned to glance at a portrait on the left side of the headmaster's desk. The woman in the painting shrugged helplessly at him. Professor Gerard indeed told me a lot, giving me a deeper understanding of you. Dumbledore noticed William's gaze, explaining aloud. When did she betray me? William interrupted the elder's explanation. Last week, William. I wanted to contact you, but you never went to the map chamber. This time it was Fitzgerald's portrait speaking. Maybe I should move your portraits back to my dormitory. William's tightly furrowed brow finally relaxed a bit. Just move mine and Percival's. Rookwood has been staying home with his great-great-grandson, and Bakar is recently in the United States. William replied no more. He pressed his hand on the pensieve, feeling his consciousness gradually descend, and so he closed his eyes. When he reopened them, the scenery before him had changed dramatically. This is Hogsmeade. Looking at the somewhat familiar tavern before him, albeit cleaner than he remembered, William glanced around. Yes. Following the direction of the voice, William saw two Dumbledores identical to each other appearing at the end of the road. You've worn this coat for over 10 years. Isn't that focus a bit off? The Dumbledore on the right instinctively looked down, while the one on the left walked as usual to the door of the Hog's Head Inn and pushed it open. The dimly lit inn was almost devoid of customers, with only a flickering oil lamp casting a faint glow in the darkness. The bartender wiping glasses stood behind the counter, glaring at the entering Dumbledore, and snorted impatiently, producing a dull thud as the wooden cup touched the tabletop. Suddenly, I realize, do the two of you look quite alike? William rubbed his chin. Previously seeing the bartender and Dumbledore separately didn't feel this way, but now, appearing together, aside from that excessively crooked nose, the two looked as if cast from the same mold. He's my brother, Aberforth. Dumbledore wasn't inclined to hide it. Did you two have a fight? Sorry, William, I don't really want to talk about it. Dumbledore shook his head, and William refrained from asking more, sensing perhaps some old conflicts lurking here. Under their gaze, the Dumbledore from memory directly approached a woman wrapped entirely in blankets, sitting across from her. After a brief greeting, they began talking business. Sybil Trelawney, Hogwarts professor of divination. I heard from Minerva that you haven't studied divination. Dumbledore, as the narrator, began explaining the scene to William, and the scene before their eyes also began to fast forward. Starting from 5th grade, the curriculum was demanding, you know. Instinctively explaining, William hesitated for a moment, suddenly realizing his secret was already out. Ahem, you know, I've taken all those courses before, and let me be frank, under Dumbledore's silent gaze, William coughed slightly. Divination stuff is useless for those without talent, even finding half a person with such talent among 1,000 is a blessing from heaven. That's what I thought at the time. As Dumbledore's words fell, the memory Dumbledore stood up, seemingly expressing some apology to the woman, then grabbed his hat to leave. But just then, realizing she was about to lose her job opportunity, the woman abruptly stood up, her deep green pupils began to dilate. Madam. Seeing this, the memory Dumbledore frowned. But the woman appeared to enter a trance-like state. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies. The Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not. The woman began to speak, her voice low and hoarse, garnering the attention of everyone in the bar. But actually it was only the bartender and Dumbledore, wasn't it? Realizing the situation, Aberforth swiftly drew his magic wand, a crimson charm passed through William's body and struck a figure who had just entered the inn. Get out, Death Eater, you're not welcome here. The man hit by the charm stumbled backward, and William caught a glimpse of the man's face beneath his hood. Snape. Although the man looked much younger, his signature greasy hair hadn't changed at all. Yes. Dumbledore also watched the figure quickly disappear into the darkness, his voice carrying a hint of melancholy. At this moment, the memory Trelawney finished her prophecy, one must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month dies. So, Harry is the Dark Lord's nemesis. Looking at the gradually blurring memory before him, William turned to the old man, filled with reminiscence and melancholy. So, according to this prophecy, if the Dark Lord successfully resurrects, Harry might die. Barring any surprises, that's so. Dumbledore nodded. To protect Sybil from being captured by Death Eaters, I brought her back to Hogwarts, and continued the divination classes. Resurrection. How does he return after being hit by the killing curse? Soul artifact, Senior. Are there really morons who use such a method? William's voice carried disdain. Of course he knew about soul artifacts, but, killing people, tearing one's soul apart, hiding it in objects. He really hadn't seen many black wizards make such things, because continually tearing one's soul leaves one questioning which part is truly oneself. Such a cognitive issue is tremendously dangerous in the magic realm. So your previous plan was, to adhere to the prophecy and toughen Harry. William guessed at Dumbledore's intentions, ultimately have him face the resurrected Voldemort, allowing prophecy fulfillment to determine his final destiny. Once again, Dumbledore fell into extended silence, only nodding hesitantly when William asked again, might be too harsh for a child just entering school. The old man's expression appeared sorrowful, him usually poised seldom showed such genuine emotion. He knew William's emotion magic influenced him, yet he didn't mind. Feels like handling it this way is rather cumbersome. Cumbersome. I mean, is there a chance, once Voldemort resurrects, I directly go and chop him? William gestured a slitting motion across his neck. No, Voldemort cannot be killed, he would merely obscure himself until next time he arises. Dumbledore's voice was somewhat hoarse. Then just kill him again when the time comes. William frowned. I'd like to see if he buys more resurrection coins, or if I chop faster. Senior, I always thought you were a good person. Huh. Drenched in sweat, Harry abruptly raised his head from the table, staring at the open notebook with visible terror. Now, Harry, do you believe? Neat black handwriting emerged on the blank page. Bang. Harry quickly shut the diary, staring blankly at the starry sky outside the window. As time slowly passed, the boy's terror was gradually replaced by a hint of confusion. What? Hagrid is the heir of the secret chamber. Shish, keep your voice down. Harry instinctively raised his hand to cover the girl's open mouth. He looked around, and after making sure no one noticed them, the boy finally breathed a sigh of relief. This can't be right, can it? Realizing the same anomaly, Hermione quickly lowered her voice, her brown eyes staring at Harry. If Hagrid is really the heir, he should have been caught long ago. Yes, his magic wand was indeed broken, which might mean that he really. No, actually, I don't think Hagrid is the heir. Harry shook his head. Hermione looked speechless. Just 10 seconds ago, you were swearing that Hagrid was the heir, and now you suddenly change your tune. She raised a hand to touch Harry's forehead. No fever. What I mean is, I don't believe that Tom Riddle. Harry instinctively glanced behind him. His backpack was lying on the sofa next to the fireplace. What I've been telling you is all that Riddle wants me to see, but. The boy paused. I don't trust him. Why? It's a kind of intuition. I seem to feel his emotions. When he's communicating with me, he seems to always be hating something. So, what are you planning to do? Hermione sighed. She found herself having trouble following Harry's train of thought, so she chose to refocus on her paper, the preparation and precautions of swelling potion. I'm planning to ask Hagrid. Just go directly. Of course, right now, I think he's in a good mood lately. Just as Harry said, when the two of them appeared in front of Hagrid's hut, the half-blood giant greeted them with a laugh. Hey, you two haven't visited me for a while. He made room for the two little wizards, and Hagrid excitedly sat by the stove and placed the kettle on the table in the middle. Come and try my tea, it's the tea leaves William gave me for Christmas. Hagrid, hearing this name, Harry's mind moved slightly, so he decided to keep asking directly, Hagrid, do you know about the secret chamber? Of course I know, the secret, why are you still asking about this? Hagrid wanted to answer casually, but the next moment, he seemed to remember something. His expression turned somewhat gloomy, and the originally happy atmosphere in the room stiffened with Harry's direct question. Because we have some new clues. Harry awkwardly scratched his head and exchanged a glance with Hermione. Although this direct approach seemed to have backfired, just mentioning it had such a big reaction from Hagrid, they might really be onto something. But Dumbledore said things have already been resolved. Just wait until the summer holidays, Hagrid mumbled, unconsciously tapping the table with his fingers, the thump sound a bit dull. But, Hagrid, I heard that the secret chamber was opened once 50 years ago. It was Hermione's turn to speak now. Oh, sure, the secret chamber, monster, all suspecting me, only Dumbledore was willing to believe in me. He gave me a place to stay, a job. Hagrid shouted loudly, his dry brown beard trembling with his shouting, his emotions gradually becoming agitated. Realizing this, Harry held onto Hermione, who still wanted to dig deeper, and shook his head at her. Stop investigating the secret chamber, give it up, Harry, that place is surely closed now, I know. Hagrid continued to speak loudly, looking at the two who were nodding in agreement. His mood finally seemed to slightly improve. so he turned around, starting to take out the rock cakes he had prepared from the oven. Woof! A black shadow darted out from under Hagrid's massive bed. It sniffed Harry several times and finally contentedly laid its head on the boy's leg. Clang! As Fang ran, it knocked a huge metal can to the ground, and a gray, fluffy ball rolled out from the opening. This, ah! Hermione instinctively screamed as Harry followed her gaze and also instinctively pulled out his magic wand from his pocket, pointing it at the large spider stretching its limbs on the ground. Hey, don't be tense, Harry, Aragog means no harm. Hagrid quickly turned around and placed the rock cakes on the table, stopping Harry, who seemed about to cast an evil curse at any moment. He grabbed the spider, about the size of a quaffle. Aragog. Hermione said, her eyes widening, is this your new pet? Last year it was a three-headed dog and a fire dragon, now it's an acromantula. The acromantula's appearance was quite distinctive, hardly mistakable for other spiders, not to mention this one, was this big. How many months old is it? Hagrid, in a few more months, it might, like Norbert, not fit in your house anymore. Months. Haha, Hermione, Aragog is already 50 years old. It shouldn't be, an adult acromantula shouldn't be this small. That's all thanks to William. Oh, he doesn't want me to tell others. Wait, Hagrid, this spider, it's not that monster from 50 years ago, is it? Harry interrupted their conversation abruptly, staring at the spider in Hagrid's arms, doubt filling his eyes. Though it was somewhat smaller and even paler in color, Harry recognized it at a glance. He could be sure this spider was the monster he saw in Tom Riddle's memory last night. How do you know that? Hagrid's expression turned dull. He carefully put Aragog back into the metal can and looked at the boy with bewildered eyes. I saw it in a memory. Harry felt his scar begin to throb painfully as if pierced by needles, causing him to clutch his head, starting to murmur, so he wasn't lying to me. Harry, wait, if the monster is an acromantula, then all the more reason that Hagrid couldn't be the opener of the secret chamber. Hermione's voice interrupted Harry's train of thought, noticing his odd expression. Acromantulas can't petrify people, only a basilisk can. Is that so? Harry was silent for a moment, feeling the reprieve in his forehead, he asked in confusion. Who is this, you're talking about? Perhaps realizing something wasn't right with Harry's state, Hagrid didn't explode with anger over being a suspect, but instead asked concernedly. Tom Riddle, Harry at Christmas. Hermione started to explain, but she, too, didn't finish. Clang. The rock cake in Hagrid's hand fell to the table with a loud sound. What's wrong? Even though Harry was still in a state of headache, he noticed Hagrid's unusual behavior. This 11-foot-tall, usually carefree half-giant, now showed fear and a hint of annoyance in his eyes, making him look like a 500-pound child. Upon hearing the question, Hagrid instinctively began to look around. He even stood up and went to the window to check, and even when he saw no one around, he still appeared uneasy. Only when he drew the curtains tightly shut to block out even a sliver of light did he finally breathe a sigh of relief, pull out a chair, and sit back down. He stammered for a long time, his gaze shifting several times between the perplexed faces of Harry and Hermione, before finally hesitantly speaking, where did you hear that name from? The two exchanged a glance, and in the end, it was Harry who spoke. He covered the lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. I received a package on Christmas, and inside was a blank diary signed Tom M. Riddle. Yesterday. Harry's words were cut off by Hagrid's sharp intake of breath. The half-giant nearly jumped out of his seat, pressing his massive hands on Harry's shoulders, saliva spraying from his thick beard. Tom, that person's diary, where is it? Saying this, he reached out to check Harry's pockets, but of course, Harry wouldn't carry a dictionary or Hogwarts, a history, so even though Hagrid swiftly turned the boy inside out, he only found a few wizard chess pieces, a handful of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, and a chocolate frog crawling all over the table. Looking at the chocolate frog tangled in a ball of yarn, it was evident the little creature had been with Harry for an indeterminate amount of time. Hagrid, it's not on me, because I've been feeling strange recently. Harry blushes as he wriggles free from Hagrid's grip. Not blushing wasn't an option, as Hagrid, in his anxiety, seemed to have nearly forgotten his own strength, leaving Harry unsure whether his head hurt more or his shoulders. Strange. I mentioned it to you, Hermione. Harry nods. I don't trust it. I can feel an awareness inside the diary that seems to hate something. Of course it hates. Harry, everyone knows what it hates. Hagrid's demeanor was strange. He trembled as he picked up his large cup and poured hot water from the kettle into it. It hates you. Me. Harry looked puzzled. No, impossible. I haven't even heard that name. But you've heard its other name. As he said this, Hagrid's hand shook even more, and Harry could feel the fear in his eyes replaced by anger. What? You know who? Voldemort. Ahem. Hagrid choked, startled, about to say something, but after glancing around the room and realizing he was the only living being in the room reacting to the forbidden name, he resignedly wiped his beard with his hand. Yes, Harry, I've told you, volume. Hagrid tried, but couldn't smoothly say the name, so he had to wave his arm helplessly. All right, you know who. He also graduated from Hogwarts, 2 years ahead of me, though I was expelled in my 3rd year. Harry stood on tiptoe to pat the giant's shoulder in consolation, sensing Hagrid's pain and regret as he recounted it. Was it because of that attack? Harry pressed on. Yes, a witch died in the castle, and they thought I did it. Hagrid spoke while looking at the iron tub on the table. Aragog just happened to poke its head out, fluttering its claws in protest at Hagrid's statement. But it wasn't me, Hagrid continued. Aragog never harmed a human, at least not 50 years ago. Aragog fluttered its forelegs again, having long lost its ability to speak with its fangs and venom glands removed. So Voldemort accused you. Harry, how do you know about this? It was the diary. It showed me a memory. I saw you, saw Dumbledore, saw Voldemort, and even saw Aragog in the memory. It was Voldemort who accused you. In hindsight, it seems like a frame-up. Harry nods. At this moment, he finally feels the pain on his forehead subside. All right, Hagrid said, his mouth agape, the horror in his eyes yet unfaded. If that's the case, you must be very careful with that diary. It's best to give it to Professor Dumbledore. Anything related to Voldemort is very dangerous. But now the issue is different. Hermione, who'd been silent for most of this chapter, takes a deep breath, a hint of fear in her tone. Now that we know there's a problem with that diary, who exactly sent it to Harry? The question left the small cabin in silence. Ahem, anyway, finding the secret chamber is no longer the key. Hermione shakes her head, saying, we need to find out who wants to frame Harry. Malfoy. Harry slapped the table suddenly, letting out a shocked exclamation. Hermione blinked. Why him again? If there's anyone in this school who hates me the most, Malfoy is definitely one of them, Harry stated earnestly, and William had mentioned that it was Lucius Malfoy who sent the key to the secret chamber to the castle, so Draco Malfoy must know something too. This is the most justified suspicion you've had about Malfoy so far. After listening to Harry's explanation, Hermione finally nodded. Is it? By the way, Harry, where did you put the diary? In the backpack. The two subconsciously glanced at each other. Hermione's eyes gradually widened. Are you saying? Possibly. Hagrid, Hermione stood up, pulling Harry along. We need to go back first. Be careful, Harry. Hearing their conversation, Hagrid also realized the seriousness of the situation. If something goes wrong, you must go to Dumbledore, he'll definitely help you. Harry nodded, and the two agreed as they quickly left Hagrid's cabin. On the way back to the castle, nothing unexpected happened. Stepping over feathers scattered in the corridor, they quickly returned to the common room and saw the intact backpack on the sofa. Harry finally breathed a sigh of relief. See, I told you. The next moment, his expression began to turn stiff. Gone. Hermione wasn't even very surprised, looking as if she had expected it. Gone. Harry incredulously rummaged through. Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, Magic History, 1000 Magical Herbs and Mushrooms, Wanderings with Werewolves, even his unfinished paper was there, but the black blank diary had just disappeared. In the bustling common room, Harry looked around in a daze. Stop looking, it might already be out of the common room. Hermione pulled Harry to sit on the sofa. She subconsciously put her thumb into her mouth, frowning. You're not surprised at all. Harry was a little puzzled. If you could notice your changes in the past few days, you wouldn't be surprised either. What do you mean? Ever since Christmas until now, you've been acting somewhat out of it, often staring blankly at something, Even your appetite has decreased, and every time I asked you, you kept saying it's nothing, but the most important thing is. The most important. You actually wrote the potions class paper yourself. Did I? The boy was a bit surprised, instinctively touching his scar. I couldn't figure out the reason, but now I roughly understand, the girl said softly, it might be Voldemort influencing you. Isn't that a bit far-fetched? I don't seem to have. Harry was a bit bewildered, apparently not expecting this. Although he indeed found himself easily distracted these days, he thought it was because Wood dragged the team for snowy day practice all the time, and the relationship between Cho Chang and that Hufflepuff jerk. You really didn't notice. Hermione sighed, but it's too similar. Similar to what? Remember last year, the month before Ron was petrified? Hermione's eyes flashed continuously. At this moment, Harry seemed to understand something. He suddenly stood up. Yes, I never connected you until today when I learned Voldemort's true name. Hermione nodded, exhaling slowly. That diary was influencing you. It likely influenced Ron the same way before. Then, what do we do now? With the diary gone, does that mean Voldemort has already escaped? The boy appeared a bit anxious, pacing back and forth on the carpet for a moment. Perhaps, like Hagrid said, we should go to Dumbledore. Maybe there's another option. Who? That's what happened. Hermione relaxed slightly. Recounting so much in one breath was indeed a challenge. So, this is your story. Looking at the two little wizards clustered at the Hufflepuff long table in front of him, William leisurely added pepper to his French onion soup. The diary is missing again. William was already numb to it. If it were before yesterday, his reaction might not have been as indifferent as it is now. Because he knows, even though the basilisk in the secret chamber was probably half dead thanks to the roosters throughout the castle, the soul in that diary is not something a little wizard can handle. After all, that thing swallowed the defense magic he left in Ginny's mind. Since he didn't pay much attention to the diary during their first encounter, William didn't put a restriction on his magic power. But who would have thought that there's a Dark Lord stuffed in there? William is very aware of the purity of his own magic power. But now, whatever Dumbledore does, he doesn't care anymore, since that old guy won't agree to let him directly become a professor anyway. Tisk, his cover is blown, there's a waste sitting in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class professor's seat. Wouldn't it be good to kick him out and let me fill the vacancy? Although letting a 15-year-old wizard teach students in 6th and 7th year does sound a bit odd. But exams are troublesome, right? Potions or charm are naturally okay. The main issue is memorization-heavy subjects like magic history. When he took that exam 100 years ago, he barely got an A, just passed, and now there's an addition of another 100 years of history. The problem is, this period is especially troublesome. World War I, World War II, Grindelwald's rise, the First Wizard War. They're all important points and just thinking about them gives me a headache. Tisk, back then I should have been harsher, wiped out all those pure-blood clans that pissed me off. That way, it would at least have the content of modern magic history. William stabbed the bread in the onion soup with a fork angrily because he was rejected bluntly by Dumbledore yesterday, so he's been in a bad mood today. William. After waiting for a long time without hearing more, Hermione gently reminded him. Oh, that diary book, yes, that thing is the key Lucius Malfoy sent. William nodded, stuffing the hard bread soaked in soup into his mouth. Savory. However, eating like this reminds him of lamb soup with bread. Just as expected. Though he had guessed it long ago in his heart, hearing William's confirmation, Harry still subconsciously made a face. Finally, he hadn't suspected incorrectly this time. Yes, so what should we do now? Bold. You know whose diary is at school? Hermione asked quietly. What to do? William shrugged. Of course, don't do anything. After all, that basilisk snake can't get near the castle anyway. In the end, Harry and Hermione left the Hufflepuff long table disappointed. And soon, Cedric returned to sit next to William. Why, not accompanying your little girlfriend? William raised an eyebrow, joking. On Valentine's Day, Cedric did send that love letter, and rumor has it that a dwarf blocked the girl in front of Cho Chang and read the letter aloud, blocking almost 40 to 50 little wizards at the entrance of the hall. The embarrassment level nearly matched that of messing up in public. Just thinking about it, even without putting yourself in Cho Chang's shoes, William felt goosebumps. She's ignoring me. Cedric said tearfully. He had gone over to the Ravenclaw long table when Harry and Hermione came, but obviously, it was a fruitless trip. With your writing skills, it's a wonder she didn't bury you with a spade as fertilizer in the Forbidden Forest. Then what should I do? You want me to teach you how to romance. Apologize, buy some gifts, and go for a trip to Hogsmeade this afternoon, then. William squinted his eyes, his knife and fork cutting hard into the bread. Take down her best friend. Hello, William. Before William could explain, a sharp voice suddenly came from behind him, and instinctively, he turned to look. Nobody was there. Here. Then, a hand reached into William's view. Oh. William lowered his gaze, finally seeing the person who came to find him, the head of Ravenclaw, and Hogwarts charm professor, Phileas Flitwick, though short in stature, was a greatly respected professor. Because he genuinely treated all little wizards equally, even Professor Meow, as dedicated as she is, couldn't help showing a nasty face to a particular troll pretending to be a sixth-year student from Slytherin. What's the matter, Professor? William turned around, wiped his mouth, and added. Oh, well, I was wondering if you'd be free tonight. Glancing at Cedric, who had again made way, although a bit puzzled, Flitwick hesitated for a moment and then sat down beside William. Tonight. Yes, tonight at the Duel Club. Yes, after the first gathering, the Duel Club was not cancelled. Despite how William almost embarrassed that old bat face, maybe due to Dumbledore's request or for other reasons, Snape was still hosting the club, every week without fail. William hesitated, although the club was not cancelled, but he hadn't attended again after the first time. After all, it was the old bat's turf, it would be too much to repeatedly go and challenge him. Besides, there wasn't much there for him to learn. So what Flitwick meant was, yes, Professor Snape has some things to attend to, temporarily leaving the club in my hands for now. Tonight is the first time. Flitwick nodded, he waved his wand, and a cup filled with juice floated over to him from the middle of the table. So I hope there's a demonstration match tonight, but Minerva, being the deputy headmistress, has got lots to do. Pomona is taking care of the soon-to-mature Mandrake, and as for Professor Lockhart. The half-blood goblin pursed his lips and didn't continue, but, Minerva recommended you to me, saying your duel skills are remarkable. Yes. And rest assured, it's just a demonstration nature. Ah. Still wanting to elaborate, Flitwick paused, stunned, evidently not expecting William to not display a bit of humility or evasiveness. I mean, I agree. William nodded, precisely the platform he needed. Once he succeeded in demonstrating his prowess and earning all the students' admiration, even Dumbledore couldn't stop him from ascending to a professor's position. By then, the great ambition would be realized, he. Oh, you're agreeing. That's truly. Flitwick touched his sparse hair, seeming quite delighted. Tonight at 8, I'll be waiting for you in the hall. With these words, the little old man joyfully leapt off the bench, not forgetting to take his half-drunk juice with him. What did Professor Flitwick want from you? Yes, a certain NPC with the last name Diggory refreshed next to William again. Tonight's practical training is cancelled too, this afternoon, just go on your date in peace. William patted the boy's shoulder, suddenly tossing an unexpected remark. Cancelled again. Cedric paused. Why, not happy? William raised an eyebrow. Oh, no. No, I mean, obviously, I'm happy, it's just. Could you help me with one more small favor? Say it. I was just thinking, under these circumstances, Cho's best friend is indeed quite bothersome. Could you take Marietta away? All you need to do is flaunt just a bit of charm. Get lost. Okay then. After dinner, having assigned the task of feeding Norbert to Dobby, William returned to the Great Hall. The entire hall had been tidied up by Professor Flitwick, removing those pink decorations and flowers from Valentine's Day orchestrated by Lockhart, making the whole space appear much brighter. The ceiling reflected the colors of the starry sky, with the narrow dueling platform standing in the center of the hall, surrounded by little wizards eagerly waiting for the event to start. Dark blue ribbons dangled from the ends of the mid-air candles, and with a gentle sound, the head of Ravenclaw, dressed in formal wear, appeared in the center of the dueling platform. Seeing this scene, the mystery among the students was also solved. After all, according to Snape's usual style, Forget about these decorations. The old bat, being in a good mood, might even remove the tables, though most still suspected he did it on purpose, or why else would he always climb onto the Gryffindor long table to teach? Could this be a mere coincidence? Ahem. Sonorous. Make the voice loud. Flitwick pointed his wand at his throat, and only when his voice drowned out the students' chatter did everyone refocus their attention on him. I suppose you've seen the notice on the bulletin board. Yes, because Professor Snape had something come up unexpectedly. I'll be hosting the duel club tonight. The sharp voice, although noisy, was not annoying. Upon hearing Professor Flitwick personally confirm the news, the little wizards beneath the stage even cheered collectively. The head of Ravenclaw was much more popular than Snape, a fellow head of house, and even disregarding the factor of the little wizard's own house, Flitwick was very likely the most popular professor in Hogwarts. This was certainly related to his humorous and witty personality, and the light and pleasant classroom atmosphere, but the most important reason was still. The final exam for Charm class was arguably the easiest of all subjects, not because the content was simple, but because Flitwick, like a university professor of an easy class, would try every means possible to make sure you pass. Except for a few students who pretend to be trolls, it's still quite easy for everyone to get a pass in Charm class. Great, but I'd still like everyone to quiet down. Flitwick raised his wand, and a pure white light exploded over the Great Hall. After a moment, the chatter slowly subsided. Now, since I haven't participated in Professor Snape's teaching, I'm unaware of your progress. We just started practicing the Iron Armor spell last week. The Stunning spell and Disarming spell lessons have ended. But actually, many still don't know them well because the Bat Spirit didn't want to teach us for that long. Upon hearing Flitwick's inquiry, the little wizards beneath the stage eagerly raised their hands, quickly introducing one after another. Iron Armor spell, excellent, Gryffindor earns 1 point. Professor Flitwick nodded joyfully, twirling his wand in his hand as he glanced around. Well then, before the class begins, I need to find my assistant. Mr. Richard, are you here? Richard. William. The transfer student. Upon hearing this name, nearly everyone recalled a figure in their mind, the figure that had not fallen short at all in the duel with Snape. Indeed, most people thought the duel, which Professor Meow interrupted, was inconclusive. I'm here, Professor. At the end of the crowd, William raised his hand to indicate, and in the next moment, the crowd in front of him automatically opened up a gap wide enough for 2 people to pass through. Seeing the continuously extended hands on either side of the path, William felt like he was going to a WWE match instead of assisting in teaching. But he still cooperatively high-fived everyone, finally reaching the dueling platform before his hand turned red from the clapping. I thought you didn't come. Flitwick greeted William cheerfully, comforting him while talking. Don't worry, no need to be nervous, it's just a performance, very simple. But afterward, I'll still need your assistance in the teaching. He clearly mistook William's staying on the outskirts as stage fright. All right, Professor. Just after stepping onto the dueling platform, William nodded and pulled a niffler from his sleeve, then retrieved his wand from Kabuto's pocket. Oh, is this your pet? Flitwick, staring at the snappy Kabuto with interest, stretched out his hand to pinch its snout lightly. Maybe you should place it below the platform. Although it's a performance match, there is still the potential for accidental injuries. Ah, rest assured, Professor, last time during the performance with Professor Snape, it also stayed with me. William nodded but didn't follow Flitwick's suggestion, instead placing Kabuto on his shoulder. Oh, really? Well then, I'll keep an eye on it. Regarding those rumors of William being superior to Snape, although Flitwick had heard of them, he still didn't quite believe them, merely agreeing with Professor McGonagall's words, his talent is really high. And as a former dueling champion, he naturally didn't harbor any malicious thoughts about bullying the little wizards. After explaining, Flitwick turned back to the little wizards, then, next, Mr. Richard and I will be presenting you with a real duel. And by the way, I used to be a champion in dueling competitions. He swung his wand with just the right amount of pride on his face, unlike Lockhart, who was annoyingly boastful. There came a burst of astonishment from below the stage, many looking at William with visible worry. So, shall we begin? Okay. The two turned around, standing at opposite ends of the dueling platform. They simultaneously turned back, holding their magic wands upright in front of them. After bowing to each other, Professor Flitwick spoke again. The iron armor spell is the most common defense method in wizard duels. He clearly intended to mix teaching into the demonstration. Now then. Flitwick lightly waved his magic wand, and a faint blue light screen appeared around him. Then he looked up at William, eyes filled with anticipation. Come, attack my weakest point. Professor, do you really have 3 feet? William lowered his voice. Oh, just joking, Expelliarmus. The next moment, a flash of red light passed, and William caught the magic wand that flew into his hand. He winked at Flitwick, who hadn't fully reacted. Cough, well, using words to distract the enemy is indeed a minor dueling trick, but that's usually reserved for real duels. A laughing Flitwick, seemingly a bit annoyed but not angry, said softly, it's actually 3.5 feet. Alright, next, it's your turn. Flitwick took the magic wand William handed over, and resumed the starting position for the duel. William nodded, and similarly waved his wand, the deep purple glow forming a circular shield that enveloped him. A pugno. Seeing William was prepared, Flitwick nodded. He gently waved his wand, several bright golden canaries emerged from its tip, flying in circles around his wand. However, Flitwick didn't let these birds fly away just yet but amplified his voice again using the amplifying charm. Compared to defense spells, the attack spells in dueling have fewer limitations, so besides the disarming spell and stunning spell, what other attack spells do we have? Full body bind curse. A little wizard in the audience replied. Very good. Controlling the opponent is also a form of attack. Hufflepuff gets a point. Professor Flitwick nodded in approval. Dansaggio. Rictusempra. Tarantella dance. Seeing the responses earned house points, the little wizard's enthusiasm quickly rose, and they scrambled to answer, afraid to miss out on points. Very good, the dancing feet spell is an excellent tactic. It can effectively disrupt the opponent's attack rhythm. Ravenclaw earns a point. Then, Professor Flitwick continued speaking while brandishing the group of golden birds on his wand. Now, in reality, situations where a single spell can defeat the opponent are rare. In those cases, we need to continue fighting, and one strategy is to use one spell to conceal another spell or strengthen a spell with another. As he spoke, Flitwick's wand gleamed once more, and Gorgio. In the next instant, the birds rapidly swelled, and soon, the flock of canaries transformed into plump hens with heavy bodies flying around the wand. However, their wings, which no longer matched their body size, seemed quite feeble. But Flitwick quickly flicked his wand, sending the dozen or so hens flying towards William. The bright golden glows collided with the deep purple shield, causing heavy ripples. When the second-to-last hen hit the iron armor spell, the spell shattered due to lack of conducive magic power. Careful. The audience couldn't help but issue a series of exclamations. But William merely poked the hen's rear with his wand and sent it flying back towards Professor Flitwick. A very good response. Flitwick cheerfully waved his wand, and the golden hen rushing towards him vanished between them. He nodded. Well then, the demonstration is over, next comes the actual wizard duel. After speaking, the two bowed again, and the little wizards who already knew the process subconsciously started counting down. 3, 2, 1. Expelliarmus. Red light shot from Flitwick's wand tip, but William did not dodge. His wand gently flicked, and a wooden post rose from the once smooth dueling platform, blocking the flying spell, then vanished. Yes, students, a skilled transfiguration spell can also be integrated into your combat. The teaching did not hinder Flitwick's continued spell casting. Dark blue ribbons fell from the candles, swirling into stardust in midair, and after circling his wand twice, flew towards William, much like the flock of hens earlier. William was silent, quickly crouching down, his wand striking the ground. Numerous stone pillars rose like waves toward Professor Flitwick, dispelling the stardust upon collision into the air. As the former wizard duel champion, Professor Flitwick lightly tapped the ground with his wand without needing to crouch, raising his own stone wave, which met William's attack head-on. After this exchange, Flitwick's expression grew serious. He nodded slightly at William, whose face showed no emotion. Locomotor Wibbly. Flitwick capitalized on his height advantage, casting spells targeted at the opponent's waist, a tricky spot for adult wizards. For defense, they were left with aligning the wand lower or relying on the iron armor spell. Indeed, Professor Flitwick was quite short, possibly contributing to his duel championship victory. However, as one who ended the Second Goblin Rebellion, William was accustomed to dealing with opponents of limited height. After all, if not 1,000, he'd faced hundreds of goblins, though not out of kindness, merely because Lanlock only had so many goblins. He couldn't just storm Gringotts without reason. Otherwise, wouldn't that make him the Dark Lord? Dodging Flitwick's jelly legs jinx, William stomped on the ground. The ribbons that had fallen earlier floated once more, twisting into a deep blue eagle that cried sharply and reached with claws at Flitwick. A stir erupted in the hall perimeter. The roosters were terrified by the eagle's cry. Almost all the little wizards gaped at the scene on the dueling platform. Unlike the dazzling color-flying spell duel between William and Snape, William and Flitwick's duel mainly revolved around ribbons and simple spells, resembling more an artful performance than a duel. How beautiful! As the blue eagle exploded into fireworks in the sky, admiring shouts issued from the little wizard crowd. Excellent! Flitwick wiped his brow. Years of teaching kept him distant from dueling, but the recent choreography with William rekindled youthful passion. Breathing deeply, he said, "Minerva didn't lie. If possible, may I formally invite you as my assistant?" "Certainly, Professor." William chuckled and nodded, "and as an assistant, I'd like to impart some skills to them." "Oh, naturally, proceed as you please." A delighted Flitwick nodded, interpreting William's intent, and stepped aside. Meanwhile, a student below felt a foreboding, turning to head for the hall exit. "Wait, Mr. Diggory, where are you heading?" William grabbed the niffler on his shoulder and threw it into the crowd. "Wasn't this cancelled?" With Kabuta pulling his hair, Cedric raised his head despairingly. "I'm actually doing this for your own good. I don't see it." Cedric climbed up the dueling platform with a face full of gloom, returning Kabuta, who had tried to turn his head into a chicken coop, to William. He couldn't help but twitch his mouth. "You wouldn't really plan to make a move, would you? There are so many people here." William didn't answer, but instead changed the topic. "How did the date go this afternoon?" he asked in a voice only the two of them could hear. At the mention of this, Cedric, who was already feeling down, became even more dejected. He sighed. "She didn't even agree. I can't even meet her face to face. Is my writing really that bad? It's indeed a mess." With his sharp comment finished, William patted the boy on the shoulder. "Given the situation, let me help you one more time." "How are you going to help?" "Simple. Just take the hit obediently." Before Cedric could react, he felt a shake under his feet and found himself standing on the other end of the dueling platform the next moment. At this time, Professor Flitwick had already stepped down from the platform. He had conjured a tall wooden stool under his feet and was sitting on it, waiting for the lesson William had just mentioned. Sonorous, loud voice. Using the same amplifying charm, William coughed lightly twice, and the little wizards around who were discussing why Cedric was allowed on stage instantly quieted down. Just now, the duel between William and Flitwick had a much higher budget for special effects compared to the straightforward magic collision with Snape before. And now, in the eyes of this group of little wizards, it seemed that William was no longer just an underage wizard of their own age. "The techniques Professor Flitwick and I used in our duel just now are precisely some of the skills you can learn in Charm class, Transfiguration class, and the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, whether it was in the past or in the future," William continued. "Now, someone is bound to ask, are the other courses we studied utterly useless in duels?" "Other courses? Potions class, Herbology, Magic History." "Someone, get rid of the person who mentioned Magic History." Having just memorized the situation of foreign wizards in the UK during Grindelwald's era, William said feelingly. "Ahem, in any case, in the duel with Mr. Diggory next, I won't use any spells except the Iron Armor spell." Before William could finish his sentence, the little wizards below burst into uproar. Everyone subconsciously frowned, evidently finding William's stated restrictions a bit too harsh for a duel, even if he was the one under restriction. Even Cedric, who knew William's strength very well, was stunned for a moment before his expression suddenly turned to joy. He was well aware that William had many attack methods beyond spells, but where were they now? In the Great Hall. Surrounded by Hogwarts, little wizards, so there was no way William could pull out those magical little props that were enough to earn him a trip to Azkaban for 2.5 months if used in public. such as armored werewolf, miniature fire dragon, mandrake. So, Cedric had to consider whether this was the only chance in his life. Are you serious? The boy didn't think for too long. The desire for revenge made him forget William's comment from 3 minutes ago about taking the hit obediently. The dueling platform had a large longitudinal span, so Cedric's voice wasn't small, and for a while, the crowd below began looking at the two of them with peculiar expressions. Did these two have a feud? But weren't they on good terms? Of course. Then. You can start whenever you're ready. Ready. Cedric took a deep breath, somewhat nervously pulling out his magic wand. Then, after the two bowed to each other, the countdown sounded just like before. 3, 2, 1. Expelliarmus. Disarming spell. Cedric cast the charm without hesitation and then almost immediately rolled forward with a flip. Well, seeing the slightly confused looks from the little wizards around, Cedric scratched his head, realizing he forgot William had just said he wouldn't retaliate with a wand. And just as William had promised, he indeed did not fight back, not even raising a hand as he casually dodged the disarming spell that came flying at him. Standing calmly on the spot, he said, "Even if you kneel and beg me now, I won't let you off so quickly." All right then, Cedric sighed. He had forgotten about William's verbal attacks that always seemed to accompany their sparring sessions. He had thought he might escape it today in such a public setting, but it seems he had been too optimistic. After a brief reflection, Cedric cast 2 spells forward again and quickly crouched down, driving his magic wand straight into the ground. In the next moment, the ground under William's feet arched up, throwing him straight into the air. Yes, this is the basic combination of transfiguration technique and attack spell in a duel. Professor Flitwick stood up from his stool, pointing at Cedric on the stage and explaining loudly, changing the terrain under the opponent's feet leaves some caught off guard and unable to dodge, forcing them to use the iron armor spell or other defense spells, just like William is doing. The crimson disarming spell impacted against the purple light shield. Its ripples left William nodding in approval. Cedric's progress was indeed swift. He remembered during the first gathering, the boy's disarming spell couldn't even knock the licorice wand out of William's hand. Having anticipated that his attack wouldn't be effective at once, Cedric swung his magic wand again, immobilis. Freezing charm. A deep blue ice cone formed in the air, and then, under Cedric's control, turned into a streak of light rushing towards William. Meanwhile, the boy's spell hadn't stopped. As he threw out the ice cone, his wand slanted towards the ground, de primo. De prim. Boom. With an explosion, the dueling platform beneath William's feet instantly collapsed, and the debris flew outwards, but before the little wizards around could dodge, Professor Flitwick extended his wand, causing the wood fragments to halt in the air under his control. Pay attention to safety. The half-blood goblin shouted sharply, though he wasn't actually blaming anyone, instead watching Cedric with a look of admiration. Excellent students naturally attract a teacher's favor. He remembered this Hufflepuff boy was just in his 4th year, but his proficiency in these charms. In time, perhaps Hogwarts would see another dueling champion. Thinking of this, Flitwick instinctively turned his gaze to the other side, shrouded in dust, that William, he couldn't quite understand. But Flitwick was sure this person definitely couldn't have just started learning magic this summer. As for William hiding his identity to enroll silently, whether there was some scheme. Flitwick didn't care. He wasn't like Snape. His duty as a professor was to teach well. As long as Dumbledore didn't expel William, he wouldn't bother suspecting him. A thick cloud of dust instantly blocked everyone's vision. The deep blue ice cone disappeared into the dust without further movement. Cedric gasped for breath. Continuously casting spells just now was as exhausting as running 2.5 laps around the Quidditch pitch. So he needed a break, and those attacks should have taken effect, right? Walla walla walla. What bee is that noise? In the group of little wizards, the sharp-eared Fred suddenly heard a puzzling noise. He craned his neck and then pointed to the center of the dueling platform. Look, what is that thing? Everyone followed the direction of his finger to see round, purple-green spheres slowly emerging from the dust. Chinese chomping cabbage. Squeezed at the front, Neville Longbottom instantly recognized this plant, normally encountered only in 5th year. All attention was focused on the round cabbages, except a few who noticed Cedric's face seemed even paler than before. How could he forget this thing? Diffindo. Severing charm. Cedric almost reflexively swung his wand. The cabbage rolling in front instantly exploded under the spell, deep green juice splattering onto the faces of several little wizards in the front row. Voila! And as Cedric acted, the cabbages found their target instantly, transforming from their sluggish movement a few seconds ago. They surged towards Cedric, who waved his wand frantically. Incendio! Incendio! Flames spewed from his wand tip, but the fearless cabbages paid the price of losing some outer layers and again reached the boy's side, their sharp leaves biting into his limbs with a pain so severe his features nearly contorted into a knot. Squeak squeak. The next moment, a black ball the size of a basketball burst through the smoke, the enlarged niffler crashing straight into the boy's forehead. Thud. Cedric promptly fainted. Indeed, this is herbology and magical creatures, clever use in duels. If you're familiar enough with these plants or magical creatures' characteristics, by making good combinations, you can win a duel without using any spells, though, in many duel masters' eyes, this might be seen as unconventional. William leisurely walked out from the gradually dispersing dust. He pointed his wand behind him. Reparo. Reparo, the massively enlarged Kabuta stood up, trotting back with a few cabbages still wanting a taste of Cedric. But, as long as it works, William added. Almost everyone's gaze concentrated on the wobbling niffler. Most little wizards had seen it. After all, this little creature used to wander around the castle, often riding Mrs. Loris before the roosters occupied the castle, though they never thought this creature, seemingly only good for being adorable, could indeed fight. Niffler's claws are very sharp, and the traceless extension bag on its belly is also useful, so there's no such thing as a useless martial soul. Ahem, no useless magical creature, only summoners who can't use them. Noticing everyone's gaze, William picked up Kabuta at his feet, displaying its outfit of the day to the crowd. Then, William waved his wand. Cedric, lying on the ground playing dead, slowly floated up and over the crowd, landing in the arms of an Asian girl. He had noticed earlier that the girl wanted to go on stage to check Cedric's condition, yet somehow hesitated, unsure why. And as she instinctively caught the battered boy in her arms, Cho Chang was stunned for a moment before she nodded, turned silently with the boy in her arms, and left the hall. As they were leaving, William noticed Cedric seemed to give him a thumbs up. He can be taught well. Only. William lowered his head. He noticed that perhaps the soul of a certain savior seemed to be pulled away by the departing girl. Had he unwittingly gotten involved in someone else's love triangle? William tried to reflect on himself. Was the chomping cabbage too cruel? Professor Flitwick stepped over to William. He hadn't spoken since earlier, but now couldn't resist. Being a former wizard duel champion, he was actually a bit traditional, and William's methods, in his eyes, counted as fringe. Professor, what you're supposed to teach them isn't just straightforward dueling, if any of them ever want to become an Auror. William shook his head. If this was considered cruel, then he'd need to lock away about 80% of his skills. Professor. In front of the two, a chubby hand was raised. Oh, Mr. Longbottom, go ahead. Flitwick said kindly. He was deeply impressed by this chubby Gryffindor because just last term, Longbottom's spell malfunctioned, sending Professor Flitwick flying around the ceiling twice. The memory had to be vivid. I wanted to ask, oh, Mr. Richard, sorry, I forgot you're not a professor yet. Neville's tone was somewhat timid, nearly drowned by the noisy chatter of the little wizards behind him. No worries, what do you want to say? William nodded indifferently, crouching to barely meet Neville's gaze. Oh, I was wondering, can learning herbology really allow one to do what you just did? Neville hesitated for a moment before mustering the courage to ask loudly. Oh, a troll asking questions now. That was, of course, not William speaking, but Langlock. Langlock. William cast a charm. Draco Malfoy's tongue instantly stuck to the roof of his mouth. Oh, you shouldn't be casting spells on students. Watching this, Flitwick said with some reproach, but he made no effort to help unseal Malfoy. What's the matter? I'm not a professor. William said with a strange expression. All right, I almost forgot too. Flitwick paused. Of course, any line of study is useful, not only chomping cabbage, like poisonous tentacles, mandrakes. William turned his head to look at Neville, still waiting for an answer. As long as you know them well enough, they will naturally become your strength. William, I must tell you, those you just mentioned are all restricted trade varieties. I picked them from the greenhouse, didn't spend money. Does Pomona know? She should know, right? Unaware of the ongoing conversation, Neville Longbottom's eyes had ignited a flame of hope. The spring sunshine streamed through the deep green greenhouse glass, warming people gently. It seems like the greenhouse has been robbed lately. These cabbages seem to be getting fewer and fewer by the day, said Professor Sprout, who was loosening the soil for the mandrakes. These soon-to-mature baby plants would soon be able to fully emerge from the soil and then be turned into potions. Really? William paused his hand that was trimming the leaves. Yes, do you have any idea? Professor Sprout nodded, asking casually. Absolutely not, Professor. William shook his head impassively as he deftly repotted the poisonous tentacles in front of him. Very well, 5 points to Hufflepuff. Professor Sprout turned her head, waved her wand, and placed the poisonous tentacles repotted by William out of the reach of the lower year little wizards. She looked at William. You've done very well. It's unfortunate that this year your final exams are the OWL, otherwise you would have passed my class. Thank you, Professor. There's always next year, right? Ha ha. Bang, bang, bang. The bell for recess rang at this moment, and Professor Sprout stopped conversing with William. She clapped her hands, and the surrounding fifth-year little wizards turned around. You all did well, but still, keep in mind, the OWL might not be as tough as you think, but it's definitely not easy. Then came a familiar lengthy speech. The professors have all been doing this lately, as there are only about 3 months left until the OWL exams. This is called, what? Oh, the 100-day vow. After listening to the speech, the little wizards streamed out of the greenhouse. It was lunchtime, and their rumbling stomachs urged them to quicken their pace. Good afternoon. There were quite a few student groups around, and as William walked into the castle, a small silhouette separated from another group and breezed through the crowd to William's side without a hitch. Oh, good afternoon. William turned his head and met the gaze of a dark blue eagle. This kind of behavior, there's a good chance you'll get beaten up. His gaze continued downward, noticing the unruly dirty blonde hair spilling out from the eagle's beak. Hearing William's voice, the girl lifted her head, and a pair of rather peculiar glasses covered her eyes. What is this? After hesitating for a moment, William couldn't help but ask. Oh, these are Raxpert glasses, researched by my dad. Do you want to try them? Luna took them off and handed them to William. Once you put them on, even those who aren't gifted can visually see the Raxperts. William was silent for a long time before finally deciding to take the Raxpert glasses, which seemed to cosplay as an owl. Curiosity is a troublesome thing, after all. Do you see those black spots? The little bugs crawling in and out of the ears of these people. Luna's voice wasn't exactly soft, so much so that even some of the people nearby instinctively scratched at their ears, as if worried something was indeed crawling inside. All right. The more one hopes, the bigger the disappointment. With just one glance, William could tell this was merely a pair of glass lenses producing light spots, but he didn't argue with the girl. He merely nodded and handed the glasses back. Did you come looking for me for something? He wasn't joking earlier. The girl wearing the eagle head was truly somewhat unsafe, especially since Gryffindor would face Ravenclaw in the Quidditch Cup finals in 2 days, and the Gryffindors had always taken herbology with the Hufflepuffs. This meant they were now surrounded by a bunch of fifth-year Gryffindor students. Oh, I wanted to find your Niffler. Is it with you? It's not. William rummaged through his pockets, then shook his head. All right, are you planning to look for it? Luna continued asking. Not planning to. All right then. Why are you looking for it? We're going to. Oh no, it's secret. A Niffler has secrets. William didn't ask further, but he decided to interrogate Kabuto when he saw it tonight to find out what it was planning. Are you going to the Great Hall? No, I'm going to the hospital wing. Okay, I'm going too. Then, the girl silently followed William up the stairs. They turned 3 corners down the corridor before pushing open the door to the hospital wing. It's quite lively. William's gaze swept across the room. Cedric lay on a bed in the corner, with Cho Chang sitting beside him. Her golden-haired friend Mary, all right, William forgot her name, but he remembered she was a Ravenclaw student. She was sitting on the empty bed behind Cho Chang at the moment, staring idly at the ceiling. On the other side of the ward, 2 beds had been pushed together, where Ron and Filch still maintained their positions from when they were petrified. Harry Potter, wearing hospital clothes, lay on one side of the bed, while Hermione with her fluffy brown hair whispered something to him. Ginny stood behind the girl, staring down at her toes. But William could tell the boy wasn't listening attentively, his gaze kept drifting inadvertently toward the other end of the room, across the aisle from him. Unexpectedly, the savior seems quite dubious. It appears this world is doomed. Beside Filch, Mrs. Loris crouched near the window, and William squinted. Kabuta was there too, now lying on the cat's head, basking in the sun with closed eyes, living life more comfortably than William himself. How about we go back tonight and teach it to recognize a word? Looking at the overly relaxed Niffler, William rubbed his chin, having heard that Hagrid's literacy action for Argo was going quite smoothly, just kidding. Seemingly sensing malice, Kabuta awkwardly sat up, only to see William just entering the door. Squeak squeak, Kabuta excitedly waved its claws in greeting, clearly not having pondered the source of the earlier sudden malice. And with Niffler's screech, everyone in the hospital wing turned their gaze, some quickly and some slowly. "Ah, it's you," said the blonde from Ravenclaw. Silently widening their eyes were Hermione, Ginny, Harry, and Cho Chang. "Meow Tilda," was the sound of Mrs. Loris, who had come over wanting to snuggle. "What the?" The most dramatic reaction came from Cedric, who instinctively ducked under the covers, realizing he had been lying in a hospital bed for half a week, feigning illness, and neglecting the magical creatures in the room of requirement. "I knew you'd be here." Luna emerged from behind William, quickly rushing over to Ginny. The two first-year girls and Kabuta, who had just jumped off Mrs. Loris's head, quickly conspired, whispering something together. William, meanwhile, approached the other side, looking at the two Ravenclaw girls by Cedric's bed, with a professional smile on his face. "It's already noon, aren't you going to get something to eat?" The blonde wanted to say more but was silenced by Cho Chang, who covered her mouth and nodded to William before leaving the infirmary. "Comfy lying there, are you?" William picked up an apple from Cedric's bedside and transformed another apple into a fruit knife, carefully peeling it. Cough cough, not comfortable, not comfortable. Realizing there was no escaping, Cedric hurriedly sat up straight, scratching his head. "What brings you here?" "Oh, I came to apologize. After all, your injuries are all my doing." William transformed the whole apple peel into a plate, neatly arranged the sliced apples, and turned the core into two thin toothpicks. The transfiguration technique can do anything as long as it doesn't violate the 5 exceptions of Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration. "I mainly wanted to see how much harm I did to have you lying in the hospital wing for so long." William squinted, gently placing the fruit plate beside Cedric's hand. Haha, actually, it's just that. Having wanted to say Madame Pomfrey kept him for observation, Cedric decisively shut his mouth, remained silent for a moment, then closed his eyes, preparing for a noble sacrifice. "Forget it, can you be discharged today?" Of course." Cedric was startled, seeming surprised there was no punishment today. Mostly William treated him like a friend, but he had stated early on that if you wanted to learn things, you must obediently be his, apprentice. So, technically speaking, he had just skipped work to go on a date. "By the way, I hope you haven't forgotten about the paper due Friday night." William stood up with the plate of apples. "I hope you've finished it." Cedric's breath caught, eyes widening. "So, what day is today?" "Chaos Thursday." Ignoring Cedric, who began to panic, William walked to the other side of the ward. He stared at the boy's head bandage, frowning in confusion. "What's this, cosplaying Kennedy?" he said, handing over a plate of apples. "Oh, I fell and hit my head going down the stairs." Harry dumbly accepted the plate William handed over. "Does that require hospitalization?" William blinked, somewhat puzzled. Actually, he fell on a senior student this morning, causing them both to tumble down 2 floors of the rotating staircase into the foyer, then collided with someone else who was holding their magic wand, which for some reason was triggered. Seeing Harry still dazed, Hermione offered an explanation with some resignation. "Got cursed." William nodded, that seemed reasonable. "No." Hermione bit into an apple and continued, "Then the charm ignited Professor Lockhart's robe." "Where did this Lockhart come from?" "Oh, Professor Lockhart happened to be passing by." "All right, go on." After Professor Lockhart's robe caught fire, He seemed frightened and started running around the foyer. The flames spread to his entire robe and the foyer's wooden feathers. Many little wizards got scared and released a bunch of chomping cabbage. At this point, Hermione instinctively glanced at William. This was indeed a practice William started. Ever since the duel club a few days ago, many students had been inspired to sneak chomping cabbage from the greenhouse. And they actually did it. So, Harry is hospitalized for a broken arm. William looked at Harry's recently revealed arm, puzzled. Yes. Then why tell such a long story? To pique readers' curiosity. And what about Lockhart? Ah. Hermione fell silent for a moment, then pointed behind William. He turned to see the innermost bed of the entire ward curtained off. That curtain was his strong request. At this moment, the door of the school infirmary was opened from the outside, and Madame Pomfrey walked in carrying 2 bottles of healing potions. She looked at the few idle people and the idle Niffler in the room and instinctively frowned. The injured need rest. This time her voice was more assertive, as the new patients this time weren't petrified. Soon, the idle people were cleared out, and William stood at the door holding a cat, staring wide-eyed at Cedric in front of him. I thought you'd be lying down till the evening. William raised an eyebrow. Ahem, I'll just slip away. Cedric, worried about his paper, turned and left, quickly disappearing at the top of the stairs, followed by 2 figures in quick pursuit. Wait. The girl's footsteps paused slightly, but before she could sneak away, William reached out and grabbed her by the collar from behind. Ahem, no, I can't breathe. Ginny patted William's hand firmly, and after a while, seeing that he remained unmoved, she resignedly dug into her pocket and handed Kabuta over to William. Squeak squeak. The Niffler, dangled in front of William, gestured wildly as if trying to say something. Squeak squeak. Are you sure? Squeak squeak. Remember not to cause trouble and take care of these 2 minors. Call me if you need help. Squeak squeak. Kabuta quickly patted its chest and even took out the magic pattern plate used to summon William from its belly, indicating that it had always followed the safety rules. All right, go then. Feeling a bit resigned, William tossed Kabuta back to Ginny, deeply realizing the difficulties of being a parent. Watching the 2 and the Niffler disappear down the corridor, William turned to the last person remaining, frowning. Are you still looking for that diary? Huh. Oh, yes. Have you found it? No, we've searched everywhere, but Ginny was actually in the common room all morning, but she said no one saw anyone touch Harry's backpack. Hermione shook her head, her eyes weary. She had been worried about the matter for several days, even though William had told them, lost is lost. But after observing these past days, she hadn't noticed anything unusual among the surrounding classmates. It's a terrifying situation. If Voldemort in that diary decided to hide himself, they might never find it. All right, I'm headed to the library. William shook his head. Since he promised Dumbledore not to interfere, he really had no plans to get involved. Oh, I needed to go too. Hermione swiftly caught up. Why is everyone tagging along today? William was slightly startled, then put down Mrs. Loris from his arms. The gray cat looked back at William, then led him towards the library. Seeing Mrs. Loris so eager to lead the way, William refrained from pulling out the Marauder's map. In the evening, after being forced by Madame Pomfrey to drink a second bottle of magic potion, Harry coughed, feeling the numb itch inside his arm, and sighed helplessly. It was a completely unforeseen disaster today. He had memorized the locations of all hazardous stairs in the entire castle, but why today? But speaking of innocence. Involuntarily, Harry's eyes drifted to the curtained bed beside him. Although he's always disliked Lockhart, he had to admit, Lockhart was truly innocent this time. Just passing through the hall, and his robe got set on fire by a charm, causing small burns and getting crushed under dozens of chomping cabbages for over 10 minutes. Harry secretly glanced from the side when Madame Pomfrey went in to change his dressings. The man was completely wrapped up like a mummy. Sorry. Harry silently mouthed an apology in his heart, then lay back quietly on his own bed. It wasn't all bad news, at least he could still join the day after tomorrow's Quidditch final. Madame Pomfrey said he should be discharged by tomorrow night, although she had repeatedly emphasized not to engage in intense exercise for a week. That match with Ravenclaw was crucial for the Quidditch Cup's ownership. You know, when Gryffindor team's captain Oliver Wood came to visit this afternoon, He looked like he wanted to swallow whole the seeker who screwed up before the match. If he couldn't make it to the match the day after tomorrow. Harry shivered, unable to imagine what an infuriated Wood would do. Besides, the match with Ravenclaw was one of the few interactions he had with Cho Chang. If he flew better than that Hufflepuff seeker, would she consider him? With such thoughts swirling, Harry drifted off to sleep, threading his way through musings and hopes. Uncertain of the time passed, until the moon hung high in the sky. In the infirmary now plunged into silence, shadows suddenly flickered. Slowly, a figure sat up from the bed, moving with difficulty and stiffness to Harry's bedside, staring long at the sleeping boy. Finally, after a length of time unknown, he bent down, pulling the boy's backpack from beside the bed into his hands. Ah! William, sitting in the Quidditch stands, yawned. He originally didn't intend to come. With Ravenclaw and Gryffindor vying for the Quidditch Cup, why would a wizard who had defected to Hufflepuff join in the excitement? But Cedric, having completed all his assignments and essays last night, was quite excited today. Cho is full of fighting spirit today, I have to go cheer her on. Cedric said earnestly as he held a glass of milk during breakfast. Then I wish you good luck. After being busy for 2 nights without sleep, he finally finalized the subsequent development direction with Mundungus, who was undercover in the Starry Sky Circus. Saying undercover might not be quite accurate, since in a certain sense, he's already become the leader of the circus. After assuming the identity with Polyjuice Potion and eliminating a series of people who might discover his identity, as long as nothing unexpected happens, he can solidify Toby Drake's identity. After all, William has always kept 2 cauldrons in the room of requirement for Polyjuice Potion, large quantities, very satisfying, and an uninterrupted 24-hour supply, though Derek, locked in the box, is almost bald. Maybe it's a midlife crisis. The solution is simple. William is already preparing to brew hair growth potion. And now William, who feels sleepy, just wants to take advantage of Saturday to catch up on sleep. But he couldn't refuse Cedric's persistent requests. Okay, but the most crucial part is that after breakfast he saw Niffler cozying up to those 2 first-year young witches. He wants to find out what this Niffler has been plotting these past few days. Do you think I should unfurl the cheer banner I made for Cho right now? Cedric sat beside William with a crumpled-up banner in his arms, speaking as he unfolded the banner. Although time was tight, I still pulled an all-nighter to make it. William glanced down at the unidentified object on the poster and was silent for a moment. If you don't want me to beat you again, you'd better not. Cedric blinked in confusion. What, do you mean unfurl it later? What I'm saying is, if next time you have any thoughts about drawing or writing poems, why not outsource it? That way, if there's any problem, you can blame it on the intern. William shook his head helplessly. At this moment, Cedric might as well be a troll. Wait, okay, trolls indeed don't understand, but Cedric is at least a normal person. He silently lowered his head. Is my drawing really that bad? I always thought you had eyes. William, comfortingly, patted his shoulder. Without paying further attention to the withdrawn Cedric, William looked diagonally downwards, where Niffler was wiggling its bottom atop Luna's head, and Ginny's red-haired head was also gathered with them, seemingly continuously whispering secrets between the two with Niffler. And at this moment, red and blue flags rose around the pitch, vaguely presenting a confrontational posture, and the cheers began to erupt from the stands one after another. The next moment, Lee Jordan's voice boomed from the loudspeaker by the commentary desk. Yes, we can see that the players from both sides are about to enter. The Gryffindor players have an imposing presence, evidently ready to greet victory the moment they set foot on the field, and the Quidditch Cup will certainly belong to them. As for Ravenclaw, yes, they also look human. Jordan, if you can't commentate properly, then come down. Professor McGonagall's voice routinely came from the nearby teachers' seating area. Every time Gryffindor or Slytherin house participated in a Quidditch match, this kind of dialogue always occurred once or twice. Oh, alright, I'll just wait. Doesn't Gryffindor's team have a few extra people? Lee poked his head out from the commentary desk, brushing his curls back from his face. Can anyone tell me who's following behind Wood? I can't see. Ms. Pomfrey. Due to the amplifying charms effect, Lee Jordan's voice instantly spread across the pitch. Everyone noticed the somewhat bulky Gryffindor team. Ms. Pomfrey's attire is quite recognizable. In everyone's impression, that white hat draped to her back seems to never leave her head. What's going on? Freshly recovering from William's an attack, Cedric raised his head. His gaze first swept across the Ravenclaw team and then turned to the focus of everyone's attention. Where's Harry Potter? Sometimes I wonder who you actually like. That's because our team analyzed the opponents from other houses, so I can immediately see who's missing. I must say, Potter is a formidable opponent, but now he's not here. If he's absent the whole match, Ravenclaw is sure to win. Analyzed so much but didn't make it to the finals. But those Slytherins are so shameless. Cedric slammed the railing hard, face flushed, and argued, 7 Nimbus 2001s in total. With all of Hogwarts's brooms combined, they're not that expensive, how do we win? I remember Gryffindor won. Cedric expressed he didn't want to talk. Okay, so where's Harry Potter gone? William turned back, looking toward the nearby teachers' seating area, where Dumbledore sat in the center, frowning. Tick-tock. The sound of the clock, this kind of feeling disrupting a peaceful dream is truly infuriating. Hey, Harry, if you don't want to be late, then you should wake up. Oh, okay. A hand pressed down on the noisy alarm clock by the bed, and about 2.5 minutes later, the lump under the covers finally showed some movement. A boy with a mess of black hair sat up, staring blankly for a moment before grabbing the round-framed glasses he had placed next to the alarm clock the night before. Gazing blankly at the deep blue ceiling painted with a starry sky, Harry finally reluctantly pushed off the covers and stood by the window, pulling it open to take a deep breath of fresh air from southeast England. Then, he shuffled into the bathroom, pushing up the hair that almost covered his eyes. Looking at himself in the mirror, the boy was silent for a moment, then instinctively touched the smooth spot on his forehead. Right. He wasn't as mischievous as his cousin Dudley, so how could he have a scar on his forehead? Although the recently ended dream did feel very real, it was unbelievable that he had dreamt of becoming a wizard and attending a wizard's school, Gryffindor, Slytherin. Those things sounded too strange. Although being able to talk to snakes did sound pretty cool. Brushing teeth, washing face, changing out of pajamas. This had been his routine for the past few years, except that today Harry took out a set of maroon tailcoats and orange short lantern pants that he had only worn once before. He remembered that today was his first day at Smelting's Academy. Placing the round, hard straw hat on his head, he sighed at the few stubborn black hairs that insisted on peeking out from under the hat, and reluctantly grabbed the segmented cane that was pressed under a pile of clothes. Oh, this outfit really suits you, Harry. Thank you, Mom. Harry, walking down the stairs, gave a brief hug to the woman waiting at the bottom. He paused for a moment, then a wave of sadness overcame him, and he instinctively chose to deepen the embrace. What's wrong? Lily Potter asked curiously, noticing something strange about the boy. Oh, nothing, just thinking about not seeing you all for a while. Harry loosened his arms with a bit of confusion, shaking his head without mentioning the dream, which was beginning to fade but was still fairly clear. After all, the content of that dream was difficult to speak of. How should he say it? Hey, Mom, guess what? I dreamt that you and Dad died when I was just 2 years old. Wouldn't I get beaten up for that? Although he knew his parents had always been good-tempered, it was better not to take that risk. Of course, but you only need to stay at school for a week, 5 days, to be exact. It's not hard, Harry. Lily took off the hat from the boy's head and smoothed down the stubborn hair that had started to spring up again. Besides, you'll have your cousin with you, won't you? But this life will last for years. Harry continued, as if he was truly sad about living on his own. You're 11 years old now, Harry. A figure emerged from the kitchen, crouching beside his wife and son. You're a young man. You're just leaving us for middle school, and you'll be back every weekend. James, Lily chided, seemingly blaming her husband for his overly tough tone. No, Mom, it's okay. Harry shook his head, hiding the inexplicable panic in his heart. Yes, just like Dad said, I'm already 11, I shouldn't be whining. That's my boy. James Potter rubbed the boy's head with some pride, messing up the hair Lily had just smoothed. Since you're ready, let's have breakfast first. Vernon will be here soon. Ding dong. As Harry put down his knife and fork, the Potter family doorbell rang just in time. I'll get it. Harry jumped off the stool and ran quickly to the door to open it. Oh, it's little Harry. The man outside the door had a fawning smile on his face. In Harry's memory, Uncle Vernon had always been like this. How could the fierce wild boar in his dream be the same person as the Uncle Vernon in front of him? After all, he worked at Dad's shampoo factory. Vernon, you've arrived. James, still eating pancakes, looked up and said, come in and wait. Harry still has some luggage to move. Oh, okay, boss. Oh, no, okay, James, maybe I can help. Vernon Dursley, rubbing his hands, walked through the door, followed by a woman and a mini version of himself, a little chubby boy. No, Vernon, Harry said he wanted to do it himself. Good morning, Dudley. Harry cheerfully patted the shoulder of the little chubby boy wearing the same outfit. Oh, hello, Potter. Dudley seemed a little shy about being patted, but there were no secrets between kids like there are with adults, and he quickly joined Harry in heading upstairs. Just need to move 2 more boxes, Harry said, leading the little chubby boy back to his room. Want to help me? Dudley, naturally, had no objections, or rather, he couldn't refuse, and helped Harry move the 2 heavy-looking boxes to their family's car. Meanwhile, the adults from both families sat in the living room. Seeing the 2 panting little boys standing before him, James set down his teacup and stood up. Since you're ready, he checked the time. Lily and I have to go to the company today, the new product needs watching. Don't worry, James, I'll make sure to get little Harry to school safely. Vernon immediately stood up as well. It's fine, Vernon, just remember to take it slow. Lily smiled and patted Harry's shoulder, smoothing the boy's wrinkled clothes from carrying heavy items. Study hard at school. If you miss me and Dad, you can call, but remember the time. I know, Mom, you won't be home until the evening. Harry nodded quickly. After a heartfelt goodbye, Harry got into the Dursleys' red sedan, which, though it only carried 2 adults and a child, still felt overloaded as it headed towards Smeltings Academy. I thought James would send Harry to Eton College. The car drove smoothly, and looking at the 2 boys already asleep in the rearview mirror, Vernon Dursley pursed his lips. I thought so too, but Eton College is quite far. Maybe they just want Harry close to them. Petunia Dursley in the passenger seat also seemed puzzled. Their conversation didn't affect the journey, and when the car stopped in front of Smeltings Academy, they woke the 2 boys who were starting to drool. Oh, Uncle Vernon, are we there already? For some reason, Harry had an urge to punch that pig face, but he quickly realized, he was just trying to see if he could dream again about that wizarding world, but linking 2 dreams wasn't that simple. Harry rubbed his eyes and got out of the car. Of course, come, I'll walk you in. Uncle Vernon, who had taken on almost all the luggage, refused Harry and Dudley's help. Red-faced, he led them to the registration area. The registration process at Smeltings Academy wasn't complicated. Within 2.5 hours, Harry was already sitting on the bed Aunt Petunia had made for him. After saying goodbye to Uncle and Aunt, he and Dudley returned to the 4-person dormitory where they would spend most of their time for the next 5 years. Just as the boy curiously looked out the window, the dorm room door was pushed open from the outside. Harry instinctively turned his head, and after a brief moment of daze, his eyes widened. Hey, I'm Ron Weasley. What's your name? The tall, skinny red-haired boy extended his hand to Harry. You mean, Potter is just asleep? In the hospital wing, Professor McGonagall's face was tense. Her gaze lingered for a long time on the boy lying on the bed with his eyes tightly shut and a seeming smile on his face. Finally, she turned to look at Ms. Pomfrey standing by the bed and asked. Yes, at least it seems like that for now. Ms. Pomfrey frowned, seemingly not accustomed to so many people suddenly crowding into her hospital wing. So many people. William looked around. Indeed, it was almost as crowded as the market at 5 or 6 in the morning. This year's Hogwarts Quidditch final had already ended, and Quidditch did not have rules that prevented starting if one team was missing a player. Gryffindor, having lost their seeker, could only temporarily pull in a substitute. And the outcome was just as Cedric said. Cho Chang, Ravenclaw's seeker, smoothly caught the golden snitch before Gryffindor's other players could widen the score gap to 160 points, thus securing Ravenclaw's Quidditch Cup victory for the year. After the match, nearly everyone connected to Harry Potter gathered in the hospital wing, Ginny following Hermione, Luna following Ginny, Kabuta staying in Luna's pocket, William following Kabuta, Cedric and William together, Cho Chang accompanying Cedric, trailed by a golden retriever. Everyone had a legitimate reason, leaving Madame Pomfrey, who wanted to drive people out, at a loss for what to do. Moreover, there were quite a few professors in the room. Even Dumbledore quietly stood against the wall, his lips moving, seemingly talking with the somber-faced Snape beside him. With the headmaster present, even the usually audacious Weasley twins didn't dare to make too much noise. The Gryffindor team surrounded Harry's bed, looking at him as if he were in a sweet dream, with varied expressions across their faces. Yet the most peculiar was surely Oliver Wood, his bloodshot eyes giving him a somewhat intimidating appearance. Just 2.5 hours prior, Gryffindor had lost the Quidditch Cup, yet their highly anticipated seeker lay here, sleeping deeply. If George hadn't held him back, Wood would have wanted to devour the boy on the bed whole. Similarly, Professor Meow was also holding back her temper, her eyes glaring as she looked at Ms. Pomfrey, who was preparing a healing potion, and asked, "But, Poppy, I don't understand." Simply put, Minerva, apart from the fact that his body is still soft, Potter has no difference from those other petrified people. Ms. Pomfrey shook her head, as she poured the potion from her hand into a bottle and continued to explain, "I've tried to wake him up, tried many methods, but none have any effect." As she spoke, Ms. Pomfrey carried the potion to the other side of the room. "Though I'd like to continue explaining, I need to apply medicine to Professor Lockhart first." With that, she drew open the white curtains, and with a fleeting glance, almost everyone saw the gray mummy lying on the bed. "Does the wound still hurt today, Professor Lockhart?" The curtain was drawn, and Madame Pomfrey placed the potion aside. Still okay." The man's voice was a bit muffled. "It's fine, it'll start hurting soon. Ahem, I mean, the good news is, probably after another week of treatment, you'll be able to walk." Ow. Great. That scream wasn't muffled at all, and it even sounded rather robust. The scream interrupted the buzzing and conversations in the room. When Madame Pomfrey lifted the curtain and came out, there were fewer people in the hospital now. Seeing the elder in the purple robe standing by Harry's bed, she roughly knew the reason. "Poppy, what is your diagnosis?" Dumbledore withdrew his hand from Harry's forehead. Madame Pomfrey didn't immediately answer. She first placed her tools back on the shelf, then returned to Harry's bedside. "The serpent." She had just begun to speak but paused, looking around at the remaining little wizards, and the woman changed her phrasing. "The creature in the secret chamber normally shouldn't cause this effect, but I can't guarantee that the creature Slytherin kept would be the same as regular creatures. If it still has the ability to act and considering the torment it experienced in the castle, perhaps its gaze could cause such an outcome." After speaking, Madame Pomfrey shook her head again. "No, unfortunately, I can't be certain. Cases of such creatures causing harm aren't well documented. Most of the victims usually die outright." She looked down at Harry. "Perhaps the mandrake potion might be effective. The morning before last, Professor Sprout told me it would take about 2.5 more months for that batch of mandrakes to mature." Not having been swept out in the recent eviction, William stepped forward a couple of steps. Like Dumbledore earlier, he reached out and touched Harry's forehead, his eyes glinting with a pale blue light, "And I can confirm that the Mandela Resurrection Potion won't have much effect on Potter's current condition. Oh, maybe it might give him a wet dream." "You are." Madame Pomfrey wasn't pleased with someone interrupting her. She glared, as if wanting to ask where William got those diagnostic results. "Hold on, Poppy." But Dumbledore was the first to speak, cutting her off. The elder turned to look at William, blue eyes behind his glasses twinkling with interest. "William, what did you notice?" The elderly man's voice held a trace of hope, making the remaining people in the room involuntarily look at William. William squinted his eyes, locking gazes with Dumbledore. He remained silent. "Richard, if you know anything." After a long moment, Professor Meow finally couldn't hold her impatience. She didn't quite understand why Dumbledore chose to interrupt the authority of the hospital wing's physician to turn and ask this little wizard who just enrolled this year, although she had to admit William was quite gifted in transfiguration, well, maybe also in charms, possibly not bad at dueling either. But there was no indication that William had any remarkable abilities in the medical field. At least, being the deputy headmistress, McGonagall had always been keeping an eye on William's academic performance, and his grades in magic potions had been hovering around an ace since the start of school, even dropping to APA few times. Perhaps I do know something, but someone warned me not to get involved in matters concerning Harry Potter. Upon hearing Professor Meow's inquiry, William broke the gaze with Dumbledore, spread his hands, and leaned back casually. A soft high-backed chair appeared beneath him, and Mrs. Loris, who appeared from nowhere, jumped onto his lap. He gently stroked the big cat's fur. And now, he seeks my help, yet he just stares at me, not even willing to say, please. Please, could you tell me, sir? Dumbledore paused for a moment, still gazing at William, completely unfazed by the shocked stares directed at him. Tisk, can't you resist a little? No need. All right, all right. William got up in a lackluster manner, rubbing his chin. But if you want me to work, there has to be a reward, like. During Professor Lockhart's recovery, defense against the dark arts will be temporarily taken over by Severus. Dumbledore shook his head. The two completely unrelated topics made everyone present pause, and Professor Snape, leaning against the corner, raised his head in confusion. He certainly knew he was to temporarily take over defense against the dark arts, as Dumbledore had just discussed it with him, but how did the conversation steer this way? What if Professor Snape also needs recovery? Just kidding, the reward can be discussed later. So, you admit you messed up? Yes. Unusually, Dumbledore nodded solemnly. I've told you, that diary is not simple, not to mention it absorbed my. Just as William finished speaking, Hermione, being one of Harry's best friends and therefore had not left, sitting beside, instinctively widened her eyes. She looked at Dumbledore, who seemed to carry guilt in his eyes, her shock intensified. In any case, leave Harry to me, I'll find a way to wake him up. William shook his head, saying no more, before pulling out his magic wand, preparing to move the sleeping boy to his territory. No. No way. The first refutation came from Ms. Pomfrey, who recovered from the surprise, and the second came from a stern-faced Dumbledore. Do you want my help or not? William furrowed his brows, his patience limited. Had he not discovered something familiar and intriguing about Harry, the protagonist, he might have turned away already. Certainly, William, but Harry needs to remain in my view. He cannot encounter any mishaps. Dumbledore nodded, his expression not allowing for refusal. Wait, do you think I might do something outrageous to him? William widened his eyes in disbelief. Dumbledore said nothing, but the meaning in his eyes was very clear. Did someone say something to you? Was it Gerald? Or that old beast, Blake? Tisk, what a hassle. Then it's settled. Minerva, could you help me take Harry to the headmaster's office, perhaps prepare a bed for him? Seeing William no longer insist, Dumbledore finally nodded with a smile. Mr. Richard and I may have some private matters to discuss. Want to play football, Harry? And no, Dudley, you go ahead and play. I want to head back to the dormitory first. Wearing a maroon school uniform, Harry smiled with some difficulty, waved to his cousin who could rival the roundness of a soccer ball on the field, and said goodbye. Turning the last corridor corner towards the dormitory, Harry leaned against the wall and sat down with some difficulty, untied the tie around his neck, and took a deep breath, as the boy looked somewhat dazedly out the window, which offered a view of the football field. And also the red-haired boy running about on the field, Ron Weasley. If it were 5 days ago, this name, ordinary to the core, might not have stirred much interest in Harry. But after experiencing that fanciful, yet incredibly realistic dream that night, Harry felt a surge of dizziness. If having known Ron Weasley first, then the red-haired boy appearing in the dream wouldn't be hard to explain, yet he obviously dreamed first. Moreover, the coincidence of events wasn't just limited to this. Potter, there you are. The boy didn't know how long he'd spaced out until a figure blocked the sunlight in front of him. I asked Dursley at the field, and he said you came back first, but I saw no one in the dorm. Sorry, I seem to have misplaced the key. The round-faced, chubby blonde boy sat beside Harry. Okay, when do you plan to go back? Oh, let's go back now. Neville. Looking at the boy beside him, Harry felt his throat dry as he took a deep breath, standing up. Oh, shall we go then? Sure. A conversation devoid of substance. Harry stared at the back of that boy. Yes, he was the last person from his four-person dormitory, Neville Longbottom, eerily identical to the forgetful little boy in the dream, even bearing the label, forgetful. Harry didn't know how to explain these phenomena. A red-haired Ron might be brushed off as a coincidence, maybe he remembered wrong, as the dream has started to blur, but a prophetic dream. Or déjà vu. Reflecting on the terms he'd found in the library these past 2 days, Harry sighed. Yes, even in pursuit of truth at the library, Harry still ran into another familiar figure, fluffy brown hair, prominent buck teeth. Harry still remembered the curiosity on that girl's face when he spontaneously called out her name. But he didn't confide his experience and the matters of this dream with the smartest friend in his dream. How was he supposed to start? I saw you in my dream. We met on the way to a wizard academy, and you used a magic wand to fix my broken glasses. It all just sounded like madness, didn't it? Returning to the dormitory with Neville, Harry hugged the books he'd borrowed from the library and returned to bed. He didn't want too much interaction with these dream characters, at least not before figuring out the dream's nature. Soon, Dudley and Ron returned to the dorm too after playing ball, yet Harry remained absorbed in his books, until the nightly dorm check came. Harry Potter. A young man in a neat suit stood at the dormitory door, listing names softly. I'm here, Professor Riddle. Hearing the call, Harry quickly stood up from his bed. Neville Longbottom, great, seems like everyone is here. No one responded. After all, it's only been 3 days since the start of the semester, and no one could be considered familiar. Just like the handsome blonde man standing at the doorway now, Harry's impression of him was limited to his surname and position. As their physics professor, Harry had only met him once during yesterday's afternoon class. Very well then, have a good rest, make sure not to wander around. The man closed the attendance book in his hand, said nothing more, and turned to leave the dormitory, thoughtfully shutting the door as he left. But for some reason, even though the footsteps outside had faded away, Harry continued to stare blankly at the door. This Professor Riddle always gave him a strange feeling, which was entirely different from the inexplicable sense of familiarity that Ron, Neville, Hermione brought him. Hey, Harry. What's up with you? Dudley vigorously shook Harry's shoulder with his chubby hand. What's going on? Feeling a bit dizzy, Harry blinked, trying to stop his cousin, but knowing that humans couldn't physically compete with a wild boar's strength. Oh, sorry. Watching the boy crouch on the ground almost about to vomit, Dudley awkwardly rubbed the back of his head. I was going to say, we're planning to play some cards, would you like to join? Harry turned his head blankly, seeing Ron and Neville already seated at the table in the center of the room. Perhaps noticing Harry's gaze, Ron, who was shuffling the cards, looked up, stared at the still somewhat perplexed boy, and shook his head expressionlessly. Potter probably doesn't know how to play. After all, he's not interested in these kids' games, the boy dragged the words mockingly. Ron and Harry didn't get along well, but it wasn't always this way. At least when they first met, Ron was quite friendly, while Harry's reaction was rather, well, he exaggeratedly stepped back 2 steps, the panic in his eyes was obvious to even a fool, as if a monster appeared before him. After that, Harry didn't do anything to make amends, he just stared at Ron for a long time, without even blinking. Understandably upset for being greeted in such a manner, Ron wasn't overly angry at the time, he even invited Harry to play football the next day. It wasn't until Harry, whose mind was still a bit confused, rejected him with, I don't play these kids' games, that Ron finally stopped showing him any friendliness. But since they were dorm mates, Ron occasionally mocked him. Watching Ron with a sour face, Harry suddenly felt a bit sad, but he quickly wiped his mouth corner. Of course, as Ron looked at him confusedly, he plopped down facing the boy. Of course I'll play. What are we playing, bridge? Yes. Ron's hand paused slightly while shuffling cards. Meeting Harry's gaze, he suddenly felt an odd sense of discomfort. All right, deal the cards then. Harry nodded. Having spent 2.5 days in the library with no progress, he decided not to evade the peculiar dream anymore. Perhaps the dream was a premonition, or maybe, the wizard in the dream really existed. The boy took a deep breath, grabbed his 13 cards, and stared at Ron sitting across from him. If he wanted to uncover the truth, he might as well start with the dream's best friend, for clues. September 5th, Ron invited me to play cards. September 7th, it was hot, so I played cards when it cooled down at night. The next day I was scolded by Professor McGonagall for sleeping in class. September 12th, the weather turned chilly. Neville caught a cold and had a fever, played cards to accompany him. September 26th, returned to school from home, continued playing cards. October 2nd, took a physics test this morning. Professor Riddle praised me, so I rewarded myself with a night of card playing. October 3rd, played cards. October 4th, played cards. Looking at the half-filled black diary, Harry twitched his mouth corners, realizing he somewhat forgot the notebook's intended purpose, probably meant to record his research progress on that dream. Only, it seems there were some mishaps. Harry, want to play cards? Ron's voice sounded like a charm at Harry's ear. Ahem, never mind, not today. Harry quickly shook his head and continued, besides, Longbottom isn't back yet. 3 people aren't enough for fun. By the way, how's your midterm exam prep going? Not playing is fine, but, midterm. Ron stared in disbelief. Are you crazy? Isn't that over 2 months away? We haven't even celebrated Halloween this year. But today, in the library, I ran into Hermione, she told me. That Granger. Ron looked up, comically opened his mouth. Come on, Harry, she's nuts. I bet she thinks the GCSE exams, General Certificate of Secondary Education, are tomorrow. Don't mind her, Harry. Come play. Oh, right, you just said not today. Saying this, Ron somewhat dejectedly put the already drawn deck of cards back in his pocket. Harry scratched his head. His relationship with Ron turned around faster than the weather in England in October. After all, they were just students, with no deep grudges between them, especially when card games served as a common hobby to mediate their interactions. They quickly became roommates with a bond akin to father and son. But, just like in that dream, Ron didn't really like that buck-toothed study maniac, who spent all day in the library. And during this month of school life, Harry gradually matched the people around him with the friends, classmates, and professors from his dream. The literature professor was like the old woman in his dream who could turn into a cat. The chemistry professor looked the same as the old bat from the dream, just that his color was mostly white. His classmates almost perfectly corresponded to Gryffindor House in the dream. And Ron truly had 3 older brothers, one of whom was the student council president. These discoveries led Harry to start questioning whether there was something wrong with his brain. Perhaps because, let me see, when he told Hermione about this, of course, he didn't mention words like wizard. She quickly found 2 books from the library. Perhaps it's a memory mapping phenomenon. You actually don't know us, it's just that your classmates in that dream made you feel deja vu, and that made you think of us as them. The book says so. Hermione closed the large tome in her hand, the cover of which was painted with a large red brain. Is that the case? Maybe, but how could you have such a clear dream? When was it? The night before the start of school. You remembered for so long. Hermione widened her eyes and opened another book. According to the theory in this book, the longer a dream stays in the human brain, the more it becomes blurred. It's indeed getting blurry. But usually, it's completely forgotten within the span of a single morning. You remembered for really long. If only I could have such dreams as well. Yes. Then I could study in my dreams, doubling my current amount. No. If the time flow in dreams differs from reality, then it would be several times the study time, which would be wonderful. Oh, by the way, I've previewed the content for next year. Want to join? No, thanks. For the first time, Harry agreed with Ron's view. This girl was definitely a maniac. But after that conversation, Harry nearly gave up continuing to delve into that dream. Perhaps, as Hermione said, it was just a type of memory deja vu. Rather than getting tangled up in these things that seemed absurd, it was better to play cards. Here we go. So, did the little brat notice anything? Shut up, can't you get lost? Is your family all dead that you have to hang around the headmaster's office? William said irritably. He really wanted to cast an evil curse on the portrait of Headmaster Blake hanging on the wall. This jerk was even more annoying now that he had become a painting. At least he wasn't so noisy before. But this time, as William's words fell, the entire office plunged into silence. Everyone's really gone. Sensing something amiss, William looked up again. Almost. Blake nodded. The last one was also locked up in Azkaban. For life. This time the portrait did not make a sound, just nodded silently. Huh. You take nothing with you to the grave. You've been buried for decades, there's no use obsessing over these things. William shook his head, idly comforting, but he knew the other wouldn't listen. After all, these pure bloods each cared more about their lineage than the other, even more obsessively with each generation. It's a scientifically backed fact that close relatives, marriages easily result in freaks. But the portrait just shook its head and changed the subject. I'd say, there's actually a way. I've always quite admired you, kid, why don't you just change your last name to Blake? I know I have a few great-great-granddaughters, though they're a bit older and already married. But for you, the age shouldn't be an ISS. Langlock. At his wit's end, William flicked his wand. He never should have felt a shred of sympathy for this idiot. Feeling the peace at last in the headmaster's office, William breathed a sigh of relief. Thankfully ancient magic worked, otherwise the spell wouldn't have any effect on the portrait. He moved his hand away from Harry's forehead, surveying the office. Dumbledore was not in. He had left at noon, saying the Wizengamot was about to deliver its final verdict on the fire dragon incident at the Starry Sky Circus in Edinburgh. And William didn't care. He had left that matter entirely to Mundungus to handle. Even if the circus was truly gone, it didn't matter since he wasn't short of galleons. With his room full of magical creatures, especially an entire forest of acromantulas, the byproducts from those creatures were enough for him to use wealth to buy himself into the Wizengamot. Fox, let me check if your development is normal. After circling around once, William decisively approached where the phoenix was perched by the door. Having completed its nirvana and even initially emerged from the fledgling stage, Fox looked far more adorable than his previously weary state. Its flame-like feathers covered its entire body, its long tail feathers drooping behind it. And at this moment, Fox stared with a pair of dark beady eyes, looking bewilderedly at William who was reaching out with two sinister hands towards it. Fox, how come you? In the evening, Dumbledore, just emerging from the fireplace, immediately noticed the fire phoenix with at least half of its tail feathers gone. Cough, cough, it's the phoenix's molting period recently. William quickly coughed a couple of times, starting to change the subject rapidly. By the way, as the headmaster, shouldn't you be concerned about your students first? Oh, all right, how is Harry now? Dumbledore was silent for a moment and didn't pursue the matter of Fox further. He turned to look at the boy resting on one side of the office. At this time, the boy lay on his back, his face extremely calm, even somewhat pale. This Tom indeed had something. He almost completely absorbed the energy I left on Ginny, the magic he created. Truly, I never thought ancient magic could be applied this way. It gives me the impression of inappropriately using a rifle for kindling. Tisk, very unsatisfying. William pouted. He had to admit, Voldemort was smarter than he imagined, at least in the field of studying magic. He really was just an ordinary person, well, maybe slightly better than ordinary people. To make an analogy, he was like a sharpshooter capable of taking a life with the pull of a trigger, but he didn't understand how the gun was made. Whereas people like Voldemort, they might not be as accurate in shooting, but they could draw up plans for constructing the gun. So, William sighed, which was why he continually studied these things despite not having a natural aptitude for them. So, what's the current situation? Dumbledore furrowed his brow, seeming to want an answer. Several options, depending on what you want. First, I could directly break the magic. It's simple, but I don't recommend it. First, it might harm Harry. I can't guarantee nothing will go wrong. And secondly, I still want to study this magic. Second, destroy the Horcrux of Voldemort on the diary, and the charm will naturally be lifted. Third, well, I haven't figured out the third option yet. I still have to research it, but I feel like Harry doesn't really want to wake up. Perhaps we could try to dive into the dream. It seems like you gave me options, but in reality, you didn't. Dumbledore stood up and sat beside Harry, his wrinkled hand pressing on the boy's forehead. In the next moment, a pulsating gray-white halo appeared on the boy's forehead, looking vibrant. However, Dumbledore didn't seem pleased because of this. He stared silently at the halo for a long time until a flash of green appeared and vanished within it. It's impossible, give it up. Watching this scene, William shook his head. Of course, he knew what Dumbledore was doing. They had now confirmed that Voldemort was the culprit who caused Harry to fall into a deep sleep. More precisely, it was the soul in the diary. Although William didn't know Tom's age in there, he assumed it wasn't very old. After all, this diary hadn't even been enchanted with an anti-theft spell. This was a sign of inexperience. And just now, Dumbledore attempted to use memory magic to remove Voldemort's influence on Harry's mind, but he clearly failed. After all, if it were really that simple to resolve, William wouldn't have been busy all afternoon. The slap therapy was ineffective, leaving Harry's face reddened, and he didn't sit up from the bed calling for his mother like before. Squeezing chili oil into Harry's mouth had no effect either, except it almost caused secondary harm by choking him. The method of forcibly awakening consciousness and removing Voldemort was feasible, but this was exactly where Voldemort was clever. He used William's energy to bind his soul and Harry's soul origin together. Although William couldn't figure out how Voldemort managed this, bridging two incompatible souls was very difficult. Yet Voldemort achieved it. They were now so tightly connected that they seemed like one person. Currently, William could certainly extract Voldemort hidden under Harry's consciousness, which wasn't difficult for him, but there was also a significant risk of directly extracting Harry's soul, turning him into an emotionless shell. This reminded him of a memory he saw a century ago in the Guardian's meditation basin, of someone with the same talent as him, Isadora Morgana. An obsessive madwoman who tried to delve into the soul and emotion magic to the extreme. She drained the emotions of her family, friends, and even students, turning them into shells and claimed it was to create a better world. This made William truly realize that any power could be a double-edged sword. That memory also became the reason he resisted the temptation at the last moment, refused to accept the emotion magic in the secret vault, and decided to continue guarding this potentially world-destroying force. Wait, does this mean he actually saved the world twice? After all, refusing to destroy the world equals saving the world. Yes, the equation holds, and the conclusion is correct. It was difficult, but he accomplished it. And Dumbledore's attempt was naturally doomed to fail. Although he might be the greatest white wizard of the 20th century, he was a blank slate in the study of ancient magic. So, the three methods you mentioned earlier. Knowing he had failed, Dumbledore sighed. He stood up and looked at William, who was approaching Fawkes, ready to catch the culprit red-handed. Let's skip the first method. You wouldn't want Harry to become an idiot, right? William adjusted the newly formed glasses, then pulled out his magic wand, tapped it on the blackboard transformed from a phoenix climbing frame, and pocketed Fawkes, who had fallen from its nest. Then, second, find that diary. William furrowed his brows, based on the testimonies he had gathered that afternoon from Madame Pomfrey, Hermione, and Ginny. Yes, I can confirm that no outsiders walked into the hospital wing that night, Madame Pomfrey assured William confidently when questioned, claiming she couldn't possibly be wrong. She had maintained a routine patrol every 2 hours for nearly 10 years. Don't you need to sleep? William was a bit surprised. Sleep. That kind of waste of life only requires the bare minimum time. The safety of patients comes first. Madame Pomfrey's voice weakened. Moreover, the hospital wing isn't always occupied by patients. Those petrified cases don't actually need caregiving. Yes, I didn't check at the time. Hermione's expression was a bit annoyed, seemingly conflicted about why she had been so careless. Harry just told me his diary was missing at the time, and I didn't check his bag. Saying this, she seemed to understand something. You mean, Riddle's diary was always in Harry's bag, he just couldn't see it. At the time of inquiry, it was dinner time, and seeing the students in the Great Hall, Hermione immediately lowered her voice and changed her wording. After receiving an affirming nod from William, the girl gasped, contributing to global warming. She then asked, by the way, I want to know, did Dumbledore give that diary to Har? Yes, I was watching all along. Ginny nodded, stuffing a steak into her mouth. I wanted to give him a love letter at the time, but unfortunately, Harry seemed to like someone else. As she spoke, she turned her head to glance at the Ravenclaw table behind her. So, I've been planning to give up recently. However, I was sitting right beside him at the time, and I'm sure nobody touched his bag. Great. Then what have you been doing with my Niffler recently? William nodded, avoiding the gritted teeth gaze from someone across the table because of an unanswered question, and continued to ask. No, Kabuta didn't let us tell you. Realizing this, Ginny immediately refused to answer, and no matter how William asked, she remained silent. Thus, the diary had most likely always stayed in Harry Potter's bag, but it had hidden itself right under Harry's nose. This wasn't difficult for a dark arts creation that had contacted Harry's soul and received William's residual power. Then, those coincidental mishaps for Harry can be explained. While explaining his reasoning, William pulled Voldemort's diary from the third pocket inside his robe. I found it under Professor Lockhart's pillow. Come to think of it, this is already the third time it's fallen into my hands. Dumbledore took the diary from William's hand, silently flipping through the blank pages. The reflection on his glasses obscured the old man's blue eyes, making it impossible to discern his thoughts. Thanks for watching.